OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, over the next 2.5 hours, we're going to somehow try and do justice to one of the most interesting and bizarre and bewildering weekends of sport that has been in a long time. Owen, good morning to you. How are you?
Very well, Ger. How are you getting on?
You've safely recovered from your trip to the wild of... It was Tralee, wasn't it?
It was Tralee.
Yeah. The conditions were not very nice, it looked like, on Saturday night on the telly. What was it like being there in person?
Brutal, yeah. Not a very pleasant experience conditions-wise. I'm not sure how long it takes pneumonia to set in, but so far, so good. Maybe tomorrow.
It feels that way, does it?
It feels that way, yeah. You're not sure.
It was one of those nights that your jocks get wet.
Yes, and my jacket isn't very good. And when I took off my jacket afterwards, my entire jumper was wet and everything was soaked. So get better rainproof clothes is probably on the agenda at some point soon.
Tommy says you stand out in the rain on purpose, though. You kind of volunteer for this kind of wild masochism.
Well, no, there's just no room in the stand unless you want to like queue up 2 hours before throwing. And I would prefer to actually watch Ireland against England and maybe a bit of United against Spurs rather than standing out in sitting in the stand cold. You know.
United against Spurs. I mean, is Ronaldo? Ronaldo must be in your performance rankings, right? I mean, he's like just scored his second hat trick for Manchester United, like 70 odd hat tricks in between.
Yeah, he just disappeared for a while, charged himself up, and came back full of beans and ready to score goals again. So this is the new Ronaldo. He's back fresh as a daisy and ready to bring Manchester United back to the top four. Or I was surprised last Sunday week when Roy Keane was giving his spiel about Manchester United lacking character that he didn't finish it with but lads, it's Tottenham coming next week. And I'd say he was tempted to do so, but even he didn't think that Manchester United would be able to.
It would have been amazing if he had.
Yeah, because it would have been prophetic, and I think that in the kind of relative scheme of things, I think Chelsea fans and Arsenal in particular would be very, very happy with how things went on Saturday night. That was a good result. I think Tottenham were looking like the threatening team, but everyone around that part of the table at the moment, with the exception of Arsenal, it seems, are kind of peaking at various different times, and it's hard to get a gauge on who actually the biggest threat are. But yeah, like I mean, Manchester United, they will get. And they have been getting a tune at times out of Cristiano Ronaldo this season. I think everybody's kind of come to the conclusion that it's going to be his swan song, a last hurrah for these next 2 months, and then it might be farewell Cristiano.
Yeah, well, Tom Brady was at the game watching, and we were like, what is going on here? Wild speculation suggesting that Brady was there to try and seek his release from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the contract that he's in. It was going to be a face-to-face meeting, but actually it was a face-to-face meeting, it seems, with the Glazers. I don't even know if the Glazers were there, but certainly it was like showing that I'm part of the Glazer family, because overnight the news came that Tom Brady is back as well. Shane Larry got a hole in one. Eddie Howe was asked repeated questions about the mass executions in Saudi Arabia, and he simply refused to acknowledge that they happened or that they were anything to do with him, despite the fact that he manages a team which is effectively owned by Saudi Arabia. And all that stuff is happening over the course of the weekend, and the Dubs are back as well. It's like a nice quiet weekend. Oh, we hammered England in the rugby.
But it was bad.
Yeah, it was good bad.
It was bad. We hammered England, but it was bad.
Though. Yeah.
That's weird.
Should we not enjoy these things?
No.
There's a bit of masochism involved in that too, isn't it? Well, actually, masochists are supposed to enjoy their stuff. This was just pain.
No.
It's Spartan, isn't that it?
It feels like this is like a real sort of... this is a real sort of like moral high ground moment that all of us can take. Anybody who watches rugby can be like, yeah, screw you, look at us looking at Ireland winning a game and not getting carried away.
Not enjoying it.
Look how we've matured as a rugby public, as a sports-loving people. So screw you, anybody who thinks that rugby people get carried away with results. This is the moment for rugby people to shine and show their modesty.
Could say, Owen, that we've got the best front row in the world. Best front row in the world.
Where would it rank?
Definitely best front row in the world.
Ireland's front row versus Romania's front row. Who wins?
Romania.
Yeah, okay. All right, here you go.
So, like, what happened to the best front row in the world narrative? That disappeared. That was like a little pop.
Well,
bit of an explosion of gas there. Turned out it smells of fart. That's what that opinion smells of.
Unless you look at the refereeing, of course, on Saturday. Like, I wonder. I was going to like wade in there on a hot take on Reynal and just say that the sort of performance wasn't wasn't great from his perspective, but sure, I haven't a clue really, and it's all a lottery when that whistle is blown on a scrum penalty. And once you get the first few, it kind of feels right. Okay,
and this happened.
This side of this, the scrum is winning and is dominating, and that seems to have happened. I think Nigel Owens actually made the point yesterday that if he was refereeing the game, it would have been level pegging when it came to the penalties awarded.
Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock on the show. Your opinions, obviously, you can get them into us by leaving a comment on the YouTube stream and tell us what you think should be in the Gillette Labs performance rankings, which are coming up straight away. Alan Quinlan's going to join us at 8:05 to reflect on the rugby sports pages at 8:25. Anthony Moyles at 8:30. Adam Pope is going to talk to us about Leeds with their stoppage time deflation equaliser, and then after that, in dead time, a winner. Cheltenham starts tomorrow. John Duggan's going to join us at 9:05, and we'll have more reaction and analysis from the weekend coming your way at 9:30. But at 7:36, it is time for the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Every week we're giving away a Gillette Labs shaving kit to be with the chance of winning. Just let us know who you think should make the performance rankings. The best place to enter is the OTB Instagram page. You'll see the comments box in our story, and we'll announce a winner before the end of the show. Take it away.
Yeah, the bad, the good, the grand this week. So many different options. We're not going to possibly get to them all this morning, but as ever, we'll start with the bad. And it was the grim derby yesterday between Chelsea and Newcastle, which we'll get to in a moment. But Everton right before that in the worst position this weekend as they suffered yet another defeat, put themselves into further trouble, especially in the context of that Leeds United result. You'd think at the weekend, Burnley getting beaten probably helps their cause a little bit, but still on 22 points at the moment. They have 3 games in hand on Watford, but they're level on points with them. They've only 1 game in hand on Burnley, and they are only 1 point clear of them. So that, for me, is the really tricky situation that Everton are looking at, and it's becoming deeper and deeper, their problems. Newcastle United are their next game. They play them on Thursday, and that is a massive fixture for them.
In a weird way, wouldn't it have been better for them if Burnley had beaten Brentford, because then Brentford might sink like a stone?
Potentially, but then you've got the buffer, which would have been, it's 8 points now, so that would have been a 5-point buffer between Everton and Brentford. I'm not sure. I think Leeds and Burnley are the 2 teams that Everton are looking around at and saying, we can really catch you. Of course, Brentford, there's the possibility of sinking like a stone because they're new to the Premier League, for sure. I said it last week. I still think Leeds are the one that could possibly get relegated from this situation. But Everton are doing their very best to change that view. It's hard not to look at this through the Irish angle, obviously, especially in the aftermath of reading the Sunday papers yesterday, and Stephen Kenny in his Sunday section was asked about Seamus Coleman and his potential to, continue to line out for the Republic of Ireland. And Dan McDonald makes a very valid point in the Indo this morning that, describing him as a championship right back, as Jamie Carragher did last week, isn't necessarily connected to his place in the Ireland team, given how many Championship and League One players are in the Ireland team. So it's kind of a separate thing altogether, and he is still playing for a Premier League team. Stephen Kenny, in terms of what he said he wanted Coleman to be playing at the Euros in Germany. I've told him that, he said. He used the example of Stefan Lichtsteiner of Switzerland, who was almost 36 when he played for the Swiss against Ireland in a Euro qualifier in 2019. He says that he thinks that since Lampard has come in, Coleman's played very, very well. Obviously, the press conference took place in the middle of last week, so it was in the context of the Spurs game, and he reckoned it was just a bad night for him. If he was 28, people would say he's just not had a good game, but because he's over 30, people are saying he's finished. Now, yesterday, I think he's been getting a lot more abuse from Everton fans online. If you Google his name, it's not necessarily glowing praise of Seamus Coleman once again, but I think it's probably there's a distance between what is a top quality right back in the Premier League and what reasonably starts with the Republic of Ireland, even though Ireland are pretty well stacked in that position.
Yeah, but look, Doherty's not fit for every game, or if he is fit, is there room for Coleman to play right back and Doherty play left back? That was still our best combination. Maybe somebody else emerges or is emerging at the moment to play left back for us. There's definitely a bit more depth there than we had in previous times, but you want everybody in form and you want competition and you want them all around the place feeling good about life. I think Kenny can't say anything else, but it's also the right thing to say.
Yeah, I think also as well, I think regardless of who'll be at right back, I think if Ireland qualify for that Euros, then I think that's probably a positive outcome.
Yeah, also Everton took the Russian money, so the wages of sin are death. They didn't blink twice about the investment from Usmanov and the sponsorship coming from Russia. And things haven't worked out for you. This is going to happen.
Are Everton the neutrals pick to go down? As in, would that make the most people happy?
I think a lot of people like Everton, don't they? Also, the Goodison factor thing that was going to save them. I mean, is it going to save them? Is it going to be great playing in front of your fans who think you're crap all the time? Is that like great? Oh yeah, this shower again, who paid their money and get the right to abuse me because that's how English football works. Like I pay money so I can abuse people. Bit weird, but that ground didn't seem like the best place to be playing football for those players.
No. It really didn't, and especially I know Wolves have been having a very, very good season, but I mean they did completely outclass them yesterday. Granted, Everton go down to 10 men, but it's not till the 78th minute that happens. Wolves have 14 shots to their 7, 62% of possession Wolves have overall yesterday. This was not a good day for Everton yesterday. I just think that I think there'll be a few little smiles if Everton go down, and I'm talking in comparison to even Burnley, who I think a lot of people have a bit of a distaste for, and Leeds United I think everybody wants to see stay up. Although there's probably a few people who think you get rid of Bielsa, you get rid of my love for your club.
Yeah,
but I think you mentioned there the Usmanov links with Everton, and also I think that there's probably it's unfair for sure, but I think Frank Lampard exists in a sphere where people enjoy laughing at him. I'm not saying I necessarily do that, but I think a lot of people like to laugh at Frank Lampard where possible. Yeah,
of all the people you want leading your team through a relegation battle, is definitely Frank Lampard, right?
Yeah, he is. Is it Frank? Certainly, if you are distilling this down to a 3-horse race, let's make it a 4-horse race. Let's just throw Watford in there for argument's sake. Frank Lampard versus Jesse Marsh versus Roy Hodgson versus Sean Dyche. Hodgson and Dyche probably come out on top there. I guess Marsh is still very much an unknown quantity, and that was such a good result for them yesterday. But maybe Frank Lampard is the bottom of those 4, and that could be the costly thing.
Yeah, but the results they're not making a lot of sense at the moment. There's definitely stuff where you're like, hang on a second, what? How did that happen? So we'll see.
Yeah.
It ain't over.
No, that's for sure. So that game Thursday, big one themselves against Newcastle United. And speaking of them, it was the ownership battle yesterday at Stamford Bridge. Chelsea against Newcastle United. Chelsea's first home game since sanctions were announced against their Lord and Saviour, Roman Abramovich. And as nobody would have been that surprised to see, there was a number of pretty grim pronouncements of love towards each and every one of these supporters, owners. Chelsea skint and the mags are rich was the ongoing chant on the streets around London yesterday from the Newcastle fans who were waving Saudi flags in the away ends. These are the same people, I presume, who have Saudi flags in their Twitter bios, who go on Twitter to abuse journalists for asking questions about their football owners, who definitely have nothing to do with Saudi Arabia, the state. They are just kind of a subset of Saudi Arabia, and I guess flying a Saudi Arabia flag is totally fine. Well, you've got the Roman Empire banner still hanging in one of the Chelsea stands at the moment, continuing to back essentially Roman Abramovich. And what's been interesting is that I've seen this described as some sort of cognitive dissonance that kind of is necessary to exist in football. But it's not that, is it? Is it cognitive dissonance? Are people accepting that these are two separate things and they can get by with their love for their club? Or is it actually leaning into the grotesque nature of their football clubs? I think it's probably the latter, especially when you hear the Newcastle United chants, the Chelsea skint and the mags are rich chant, and the Saudi flags. For me, that's not separating the two things whatsoever. It is absolutely embracing the fact that these two things are linked, and we love the fact that we've got this regime in charge of our club.
Yeah, I think that's more likely. We have some video from Eddie Howe yesterday being asked questions after Newcastle's defeat to Chelsea. Have a listen to this.
I know I'm here to manage the football team and coach the football team, so I'm well aware of what's going on around the world, but my focus is on trying to produce a team to win football matches and get enough points to stay in the league, and that's all I'll talk about.
But it is your ultimate boss, Mohammed bin Salman, who was responsible for this. You work for him ultimately to six the top of the company, so you can understand why we do ask these questions.
I don't know what to answer to that. I'm going to talk football. That's all I'm concerned with.
Do you never reflect on these bigger questions? I mean, given how the club is used, how football is being used politically,
they're fair questions precisely because of that.
I think I've made my position clear.
Was Miguel asking the second question? Was it Tariq Panja asking the first?
Yeah, I think so. Asking about the 81 people executed in Saudi Arabia on Saturday, and saying that I'll stick to football. So it seems that this is coming to a head now at this point, and it's obviously as a result of their opposition owner. And
is it coming to a head though, or actually what's going to happen here? So Boris Johnson's on his way to Saudi Arabia this week to ask for more oil because of what's going on with the situation in Russia. Like, because of Russia's illegal war on Ukraine. I should choose my words carefully here and say what it is. I don't think I do think there's an opportunity here, but what we're seeing is that the billionaires are circling around Chelsea to try and get it at a knockdown rate, which is like them taking the opportunity of the war to get an asset at a lower price than it would really be. Whereas actually what should happen is the club gets nationalised and gets given to the fans. Like, that's the only thing that should happen here. And they should be using that as a springboard to nationalise all the other clubs and say, we're taking 51% of all of those and we're going to give them to fans because we believe football is a community asset, and that's going to wipe out all of the difficulties that football has had. You can only have a budget that accurately reflects the amount of money you're making, as opposed to it now being a plaything for the rich. But it's not really a plaything for the rich. It's actually a political tool for the rich. It wasn't just crack that Abramovich was having, and it wasn't just crack that Alistair Usmanov was having, and it's not just crack that everybody else is having. It is either massive amounts of money in some cases, Manchester United, or it is political capital necessary for you to be able to function in a global society, which is what Saudi Arabia are trying to do here. So, I mean, I think, ironically, what's happened with Saudi Arabia is that there is more attention on the mass executions than there would have been if they were involved in Newcastle, and that's down to people like Miguel and people like Tariq Panja constantly bringing up that story and constantly talking about the sports washing. Because if that didn't happen, then what would have happened is Chelsea got loads of money there from where did Abramovich get the money? I don't know, but he's spending it on all these gaudy things like, oh, look at all those superstars that they've signed. Wow, they're playing mediocre for enough football considering the talent they have. Oh, he sacked another manager. Let's not ask any questions about his relationship with Putin, which it turns out the British Secret Service seemed to know quite a lot about. They were ready to go. As soon as they needed to go, they went. They could have gone years and years ago. So, like, don't be fooled. I don't think anything's going to happen with Newcastle and Saudi Arabia, except Eddie Howe gets asked some uncomfortable questions, and that's it. But
I think that the uncomfortable questions are just becoming more frequent now and becoming, despite the reaction that you'd be getting from a cohort of fans, a more obvious thing to do. As in, it's before kind of felt that asking a question like that at a Premier League press conference was a relatively brave thing to do, or even some of the other journalists would be giving you a bit of side eye or whatever. Whereas this, it feels...
What's the mood in the camp, Eddie? What's the mood in the camp?
It feels now that this is very much the story. It is front and centre, and if you're not asking these questions in a press conference, something would be weird. And I just think that we're not that far away from, from Pep Guardiola and other clubs being put on in focus once again. And it's not just Manchester City. They're obvious example. There are a number of different clubs. Arsenal, for example, who have very questionable links as well. And all those people who are associated with those clubs should definitely be under the microscope as well. And I think that this could potentially have a domino effect. It's a very optimistic outlook, and I'm not saying that anything's going to come as a result of it, but I just think that if this is a real conversation, it may actually, make yourself think twice if you're the next Eddie Howe, or if you're the next person to go into Newcastle United.
Well, that's what the price is.
Yeah,
it didn't make them think twice, though.
But that's the past. I'm just saying that this could actually affect what's going to happen in the future, like whoever comes into the club next. This is a constant drumbeat of questions about the manager. If these questions don't go away, then it becomes very, very uncomfortable for the manager, because it should be uncomfortable to be a manager of a club who are bankrolled by the Saudi state. Like, that should be the situation that you're in, and the role of the journalist is to ensure that reality is experienced.
I hope you're right, but I don't think that I think that, like, a lot of these managers, you get hours and hours and hours and hours of media training, and you're like, okay, that's... So I've heard all these questions, and I've decided that I'm taking my job, which is it's not the Saudi Arabian government, it's the Saudi Arabian investment arm. This isn't Saudi Arabia United, although it is, and we all know that. So, I hope you're right, but I don't know. I mean, it doesn't feel like this is that different from stuff in the past. Maybe it is. Maybe the turning point is Abramovich, and they do seize the opportunity that we were talking about like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
When the super yachts were getting seized, and it's like, well, this is just the same. Just take the stuff, take it, and give it back to the people who actually deserve it and own it. Really.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's going to happen. It's just to be clear, I don't think that sort of overhaul of actual football ownership is going to happen. I think that would be.
But then nothing else matters. So all you're talking about is like there'll be uncomfortable questions for somebody who's able to deal, who is able to deal with it. Like Eddie Howe will be asked a lot of questions repeatedly, and he'll go, "Yeah, look, I'm well aware of what's going on in the world." He's not going to pull a Phil Mickelson on it.
Yeah, but I don't think that the fans seizing back ownership of the clubs is necessarily the only outcome here that is different to the current situation where everybody's got their head in the sand.
But what else is there though?
Like I do think that as I just said, like I think that there is a situation where the next Eddie Howe is questioning whether or not they go to the club. That's not the club's going back to the fan ownership. I'm saying that people will question their links with the club, and it's just a behavioural change. It might make it more difficult to get the manager that they want.
Okay, and I'm sure there are definitely conscientious objectors in football, and I'd say there are already some who decided that they didn't want to be associated with that, and that's probably where they ended up with Eddie Howe. Like, there will always be a really good young manager who feels like this is his one chance to catapult to glory. Like, and maybe Eddie Howe leaves in the summer with his reputation massively enhanced and gets a better job somewhere that isn't associated with the Saudi state. But, like, he'll still have used this time to improve his standing in the eyes of potential employers.
Like what's interesting as well on a different level to this is what else kind of Tuchel was saying yesterday, just talking about his own role and saying that there's no doubt he'll stay till the end of the season. And then, I don't know, there's this conversation around Lille midweek and, you know, not having a private jet to get there. And I think Tuchel was gifted this on a silver platter yesterday when asked about this, because it was just a great PR moment for him where he could talk about his own 7-seater car and how he'd drive it if he had to. This sort of humanising nature of this whole thing, where we are the poor man in this situation now. We can't afford, we might not be able to afford a private jet to get to France, and I'll drive if I have to. Like, I wonder what sort of impact that will have as time goes on, where the British government are like, oh, poor old Chelsea, those are real football people, real football fans, also potential voters. We can't be pissing these people off too much. And actually the end game here is a pretty soft transition from one megalomaniac to another.
Yeah, and just one thing, Tuchel obviously is getting a lot of credit, from loads of different sources. You don't have to dig too far to say Tuchel, class act, football man, all that kind of stuff. But Tuchel snapped under the same questioning that Eddie Howe was under yesterday, and like at that stage was actually saying the same thing as Eddie Howe, except did it in such a forceful way that it ended as opposed to keeping going, because, you know, the press officer stepped in and said, oh, football only, because we don't know what's going to happen here. But, like, you know, I mean, he is very well educated, seems very much aware of the rest of the world scenario, and took the job in the first place. You know, like we can't be expected to answer questions. You can. You're going to have to answer questions on it. You're going to have to answer for the jobs that you take and for the people who ultimately you work with. Right. We've only got 10 minutes left to go. Mark Dunning says, was I the only person that Googled, have Ireland ever put 50 points in England at Twickenham before after James Lowe scored his try? Certainly, things were looking up at that stage, weren't they?
So what's, give Ireland a rating out of 10 on Saturday? What are we
I think you probably give them a 7.5, you know? Like, international test rugby is really difficult. England were absolutely, they had the bit between their teeth, swing low at Twickenham, looked pretty grim for a moment there, and then we just thought our way out of the situation. Like a few bit of breaks, and it was like, actually, you know, we've got this. We are better than them, and that's what should have happened. We were better than them. We should have won in a controlled manner. We let them back into the game because, like, you remember how crap Wales were when we beat them? We absolutely annihilated them. They nearly beat the French the night before. Like, we like test rugby because even when a team gets a man sent off, it doesn't automatically guarantee a 25, 30, 40 point victory. Like, we played quite well. The front row, the scrum, is not the best front row in world rugby. I know they've got injuries, but we don't have any strength and depth, it turns out. So, lots to work on, lots to be worried about. But we beat England at Twickenham in the end with double scores with a bonus point.
like, why is that Wales performance better on Friday than it was in week one? I'd say one of those factors is that they're playing at home now, as opposed to how they were in week one. And home advantage is such a massive thing in the Six Nations. Like, it would be possibly a more average reflection on Saturday had that game been in Dublin, but it was in Twickenham. This has not been an easy place to go for Ireland. Yes, the red card does make a positive difference. I don't think you can argue that it doesn't help Ireland. Of course it helps Ireland, and the scrum was a complete disaster, but that's the context, and around that there was a chaotic game that Ireland ended up winning on the scoreline, at least comfortably, which is just bizarre, to be honest. I think that a couple of years ago, the idea that if a broken, chaotic game emerged and Ireland would actually come out victorious away to England, I think that would have been a laughable notion. The fact that that's actually after happening is so strange. Like, the question for me is just how much you can read into that, and how much, if that chaos emerged 10 times now, how many times would Ireland win it with 15 against 15? And maybe they wouldn't win the majority of them at all. But they did on Saturday, and I don't know, there was a strange kind of tone in the build-up about Eddie Jones talking about Ireland and them potentially getting overpowered and facing a side that they'd never come up against before. So maybe the red card is the most important thing in that context. But we're going to find out a hell of a lot more now when New Zealand, when the New Zealand tour happens, and when South Africa are in town later in the year, to see just how well Ireland do hold up in those situations. But I don't know, I think that the prevailing theme from Saturday night is certainly positivity, because the one big loophole in all this is the fact that England had the man sent off. Like, it wasn't really Ireland's fault. Like, I mean, if you're going to judge the Ireland performance, judge it on the scrum for sure. And would
be nice to see us play against 15 for a change in the Six Nations. Just, back-to-back games. There's been red cards, and obviously the red card in the Italy game. Like, Italy played okay against Scotland, scored 22 points. It wasn't the complete washout that our game was. So again, we're just there is a bit of fluke off it, the way there was the fluke off Wales last year. It's like, all these decisions are going in one direction, and when the decisions didn't go our direction, we got beaten by the French, and maybe we will greatly regret the opportunity to have won a Grand Slam this year. But I think it's good to have stuff to work on in the aftermath of a game where you win and are definitely the better team, but there's loads of things that you need to do better.
What happens if Ireland end up stumbling across one, and I'm talking about just a good backup to Andrew Porter, a younger version of Cian Healy, basically, because as great as he's been, it's unfortunately just the wrong end of the career at the moment. If Ireland somehow managed to find somebody who is a good backup to Andrew Porter come next year, does that completely change how it's viewed? Because I think people will accept
front row in the world, best front row in the world.
I think people will accept that the furlong thing was an off day, right? And I don't even know if it was. It could potentially be the rest of the front row getting decimated as well, and furlong ends up taking a lot of the heat for that.
And the refereeing issue that they seem to be very upset about.
But it just seems that there's this one very obvious area now, and if that improves over the course of the next little while, I would have thought that the picture looks pretty positive. The only thing is, I actually do think that there's a deeper thing here on top of it all, is that the last time we played England the year before World Cup, we also beat them. And we beat them pulling up a little bit as well, to be honest. And we all know what happened next. So I actually think that there's a little bit of that people automatically expect that this Eddie Jones team is going to come next year, and Ireland are going to fall away next year. Well, and that's what's happened in history, so who are we to argue?
Well, it was the most recent one. I don't think it's guaranteed that we're going to fall away. I think it's definitely guaranteed that they're going to come back. I thought they were excellent down to 14 men for a large portion of the game. Like, all the stuff beforehand, they haven't a clue what they're doing. That was not a team who was laying down or didn't know what they were doing, or who were devoid of identity or any of that kind of stuff. They knew exactly what they were supposed to be doing, and they followed that very quickly. And they have emerging leaders, and they have an emerging style, and they have an emerging core. And look, we should hope that England get rid of Eddie Jones. That's what we should hope.
I think Eddie Jones has done himself a lot of favours after Saturday, or a favour has been handed to him. The best thing that could have happened to Eddie Jones is Ewells getting sent off, because all of a sudden, there's a little bit of a sob story for England, and England showed up gutsy, fighting for their head coach, despite only having 14 of them. And I think that could stand Eddie Jones in good stead in the long run. And we know that they're going to come good next year.
We're going to get to rugby with Alan Quinlan in just a moment. If you're watching this on podcast, then make sure that you subscribe to the OTB Rugby feed as well. And you can subscribe to our YouTube channel while you're at it, youtube.com/off the ball. It's 8 o'clock this morning. We've got to get to Green. Where are we starting?
Let's just give Tom Brady a quick mention here. He is back. He's going to play for the Bucks once again next season, and I'm not sure, was this something that you saw coming? I guess the overtures were there once he's involved with a football club owned by the same people that own his American football club.
I didn't think it was going to happen this quickly. He's been retired for 40 days. A long time to spend in the desert alone, wandering. I mean, is his giant mansion one of the giant mansions he lives in really as bad as 40 days in the desert that our Lord found, whatever it was that he found there? Like, I don't know. I did not expect this to happen this quickly, but certainly the rumours were non-stop. When he said you never say never on the day he retired, immediately American media went into overdrive, and the last week in the NFL has been absolutely wild. Like, one of the biggest trades in history, with a quarterback, Aaron Rodgers deciding to stay where he is, like a couple of hours later, a player banned for a year for gambling on his own team, one of the best players in the league traded, and then Tom Brady coming out of retirement. I'd probably forgotten a load of it there as well. So the Buccaneers immediately, like, their odds collapsed for everything. So he is that transformative figure, and it did feel like if he was coming back that he might come back somewhere else, that maybe he would try and get onto the San Francisco 49ers because he tried that before. But then again, like, is this the end of him? I don't know. They're like, oh, this is it. It's one last dance style thing. But actually, that might not be the case.
Yeah, he obviously led the NFL in yards passing, touchdowns, completions, attempts in 2021. So, I mean, maybe he's accepting that if he comes off that, he's still going to be an excellent quarterback. He probably looks at his division in the NFC South and thinks to himself, if he can win that. I know Deshaun Watson might be playing there next season with the Panthers. There's talks of that happening, so maybe that changes, but they're still in a very, very good position to be playing playoff football next year. A quick word for the guy as well who, I'm not sure did you see this, the last ever Tom Brady touchdown pass went on auction last week, and an unidentified person spent $518,000 for the ball that was passed to Mike Evans in his last ever play. It's not his last ever play anymore, so you spent $500,000 on something that probably isn't even that valuable.
I wonder, is there like a residual value in the fact that it was like the pre-Brady retirement? So like, oh, this is important given that, like, I don't really understand how sports memorabilia acquires the value that it acquires.
Just think of it like an NFT.
I mean, it definitely feels a little bit like an NFT, doesn't it?
Although
at least you get the football, you can throw that around.
Yeah.
Okay, last one.
The Dubs. The Dubs are in green for the first time in a while. They're back.
I hate to say I told you so, Owen.
What were you saying, though?
I was saying, do not write the Dubs off. The Dubs are being written off everywhere. Desi's being written off. These players are being written off. Stop writing them off. They're not gone. They're just not fit. I see they changed, their soul changed according to Eamon Sweeney in the papers today. But actually, they got players back from injury. That's what happened. They have more players available to them now than they've had, and so therefore they have better players available to them, and they have strength and depth, and they have players in the right position. Like, did Brian Hare play in the forwards? Is that maybe where he might end up in the summer?
Yeah.
Is that maybe his best position? Were they just giving him game time to, like, do that thing that Geezer does, where, like, and that Ajax do, where you play a load of football, you get on the ball and you get responsibility, and okay, we're trying you out here, it's an experiment, but you're going to get on the ball and we want to get football into you, and they got football into him. And the forwards were pretty good yesterday.
Like, I don't. So
in the first half, and the game's over at that stage.
Yeah, and like I think we've seen that on a couple of occasions this time during this league campaign as well, that it is one half of football that can win you games. But like, I do think that some of the talk of Dublin demise is still well founded, and because the context of it all was we're coming from a team that's won 6 All-Irelands in a row, and nobody had any hope, to the point of us where everybody else has a bit of hope. And that's still obviously the case.
That's not the context, though. That's not the context. I think that's history. This team is no longer that team. But this year, Dublin are absolutely All-Ireland contenders. And there were various stages where it was like, oh, no, you can forget about Dublin now for a long time. That's it. No, the players coming through, they're nowhere near as good. They don't have to be as good. They don't need Dermot Connolly and Paul Flynn and Stephen Cluxton to win an All-Ireland. Tyrone won the All-Ireland last year without those players.
Yeah, like I do think, though, that a lot of the conversation was around how did they get back to the level where they were a couple of years ago, which is, of course, the greatest team of all time. And I think the expectation was that it's going to take a little while, if that's going to happen at all. And that hasn't changed after yesterday. The question is, can a weaker Dublin than a couple of years ago get back to winning an All-Ireland? I would still say they're not favourites, and I would put maybe two teams at least in front of them.
We talked about this a little bit on Friday evening show. if you put Dublin and Mayo in an All-Ireland final today, right, but haven't got there, and so therefore, some players are in good form, etc., price it up for me. What's the spread?
It's probably Mayo -2, isn't it?
Or -1. It's Mayo -1. It's Kerry. So give me this one for Kerry.
Probably Kerry -2.
Okay, I'd say Kerry -2, Mayo -1. And that's it.
And then Dublin are favoured against everybody else?
It's not 3 points or 5 points or anything like that. Like, no. Dublin are right there. Absolutely right there. And if any of those Dublin forwards is feeling the weight of the ball in their hands in the last 2 minutes with the game on the line, you're giving them, like, if Costello has it to win an All-Ireland, I'm backing him to do that. I'm backing Dean Rock to get his free taken back. Like,
I just think, just to kind of like, I know there's a multitude of other opinions that have been voiced, but I just think that after the All-Ireland semi-final last year, I thought that was one half of football where Dublin froze and something weird happened. And when we were doing our crystal ball at the start of the year, I said Dublin would win the All-Ireland this year. So I do think the opening stages of the league this year were a little bit eye-opening, where it was like, okay, they're not automatically... There was more to that second half of football than just that 35 minutes. There is a greater downturn. So I do think that still exists, but they're not going to dip low enough for them to not be in the conversation this year. No,
they're absolutely, like, you're penciling them in for an All-Ireland semi-final appearance this year. Like, you were making them favourites, I think, for the Leinster title.
Yeah, like I definitely think so, and of course Newbridge was a massive moment for Kildare the previous week, and that will give them belief when these two counties inevitably come up against each other in the summertime. But you're definitely backing Dublin in that occasion, especially after yesterday. And yes, things have changed after yesterday's performance, but as you say yourself, new information came to light.
The suggestion sent into OTB on Instagram. Sean Fox says Monaghan in green. Bloody Monaghan again. What, like, and Donegal? What were you doing? Kildare really needed Donegal to do Monaghan, and that would have been a massive favour for them. But they just couldn't do it at home. I think it's Monaghan's first win in Ballybuffet in a million years.
Yeah.
Trevor Halloran says Shane Lowry in green. He had a home one overnight. If you missed that, red for Reynal. He made sympathy decisions for England. There was always going to be a bit of evening things up, but not issuing a yellow card for the scrum penalties, maybe because he didn't believe in them. Luis Diaz in green. I mean, Luis Diaz, like, something good is going on at Liverpool where they can just sign players and stick them straight in the team. We'll talk about that later on. Dave says Judd Trump at 147. Odegaard in green, what a bargain for 30 million, says Muran Yassin. And Kevin Foyne says Dublin and Ronaldo in green. We'll talk Ronaldo a little bit later on in the week, but for now, that is your performance rankings.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
Yeah, your performance rankings every Monday morning with Gillette Labs. We've got a packed show still to come. Gaelic football with Anthony Moyles, talking football with Adam Pope at the BBC, rugby with Alan Quinlan next. But first, here's Kenny Cunningham talking about the trouble that Everton are in.
Just to touch on relegation, we didn't see Everton today, but beaten again. I think it's 2 wins in 19 matches for Everton. Leeds got a late winner. Watford won today. The cliche is they're too good to go down, but the argument is, well, then you're too good to be in a relegation scrap in the first place. Yeah. How much trouble are Everton in right now?
Yeah, I think it's about, well, 5 teams are in a lot of trouble. I think those back-to-back wins from Brentford have taken them out of the equation. Newcastle likewise, and all those teams below them. I think it's the 5 teams. They're all in trouble. That was a big win for Leeds today, Nathan. I watched them midweek. They were literally all at sea. Losing to Aston Villa at home, they looked absolutely rudderless and devoid of confidence in that game, but they've bounced back today, got a last minute winner, so that lift the whole football club. Burnley looked as if they were putting a bit of a run together to get themselves out. They've dropped back as well. Watford, you'd written them off a couple of weeks ago. Suddenly they found a win from absolutely nowhere yesterday, and you're right, Everton are bang in it. You're absolutely right. Of course they're not good to go down. Big problem they have. We're talking about Arsenal in terms of the strides they've made in central defence, how much more solid they're looking. For Everton, it's the opposite. They've got a gaping hole in the centre of their defence. Michael Keane, the most experienced defender, Lampard's had to take him out of forward line. Really struggling, he's lost his confidence. Really struggling in that area of the pitch. And even other players as well. Calvert-Lewin's come back into the team. He's been very quiet, Nathan. That's a lad who was exceptional early part of the season. He needs to find his form quick. Still feel as if Everton will have enough to get out of it. Like I said, probably similar to Manchester United, more of a gut feeling when it comes to Everton. But it'll be fascinating. There'll be more twists and turns between now and the end of the season. It's great. We're still talking about a battle for the title, a battle for 4th place, and of course those 5 teams, it looks like now battling for those 2 remaining places, which will keep them in the Premier League.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Mike Keeley was brilliant again. He's so unselfish in his work.
Munster legends Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs are joining forces to bring you all the latest analysis, news, interviews and so much more.
If you look at Munster's stats against the Dragons at the weekend, the one thing that really jumped out at me is 241 passes.
Gavin Coombs goes into the second row in the second half, and is that an option going forward?
The Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Available every Wednesday. Don't miss a moment of action. Subscribe to the Rugby channel on the OTB Sports app and turn on your notifications now.
FBD Insurance knows this sound spells trouble for van drivers. But if you're an existing FBD customer, you'll get 15% off a new van insurance policy. It's how we're keeping you and your van on the road. Visit fbd.ie or contact your local branch. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. Terms and conditions apply. 15% discount available on new commercial motor policies only when an existing FBD farm, business, car or home policy is in place. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Commercial motor insurance is underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
We brought you live commentary over the weekend of both Chelsea against Newcastle, their 1-0 win, and Arsenal's 2-0 win against Leicester on Sunday on Off the Ball on News Talk. Kenny Cunningham called Arsenal's win for us alongside Nathan. We'll bring you all the rest of Kenny's reaction at 9:30 this morning, or you can listen in the OTB Football Podcast feed now, but at 11 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM, which is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. I'm delighted to say we're turning our attention to a routine win for Ireland. Wasn't quite routine, really. It was a bit of a roller coaster against England. And Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you.
Morning, Ger. How are you?
When it got to 15-all, what did you think was going to happen?
That's a good question. It wasn't very comfortable for Ireland. I think they were disjointed and a bit ragged at that stage. I was pretty confident that they would find a little bit of composure and calmness and get the next score, and they did that. Look, it was probably the emotion and intensity that England brought and was very impressive, and they made it very difficult for Ireland at that stage. It was certainly pretty nervy.
That emotion and the celebrating of every penalty and every scrum, like, I can see exactly why England were doing that, and it seemed to have an impact. It certainly spoke to me of a team who believes in their coach, who wasn't like laying down, who wasn't, not playing for him. So all the stuff about the disharmony in England, that all seems to be nonsense, is it?
I wouldn't say there's disharmony. I think they seemed like they stuck together and they reacted to the sending off and the pressure they were under. It's strange when, and I mean this, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but when you read a lot of English journalists and English ex-players saying they were incredibly proud of the team and that was a brilliant performance from England, it's a little bit strange, isn't it? Certainly from being Irish and having an Irish team in Twickenham winning. It's kind of strange where they are at the moment and the uncertainty that's with their team at the moment. But yeah, they looked like they wanted they put up a massive fight, which would be very pleasing for anyone involved in the English setup, because I think after the sending off and if Caelan Doris's try is given, you think Ireland could really run away with this and it could be one-way traffic. But it happens. I've been on teams before where you've gone down to 14 or you've been reduced to man, and it does spur you on and it makes you react. And I think they can certainly take a lot from that point of view. They still have issues from an attacking point of view and where they're at. I agree with Johnny Sexton. Ireland would have lost that game 12 months, 2 years ago. I think you just going back to your first question, the composure they showed was very impressive. And at no stage did they panic. I think if some of the passes kind of stuck earlier on in the game, it could have been a bigger scoreline. And there were issues for Ireland. I know you'll probably ask me about them in a second, but I suppose from an English point of view, you're not clutching at straws. You have to take some positives, and that desire and fight, you can accept that, and that's what English people are probably accepting today.
Scrum, like it was. I know the refereeing. We can get into this now if you want, but what were you going to?
Well, no, when you were talking about the passes not sticking, like when you look at this and the sloppy Irish performance, which still results in a game that they won by 17 points in Twickenham, is that not just a part of the stakes of having the extra man, or the pressure of having an extra man? And they've come out on top in that game. The next time that happens, they're like, right, okay, we know what it's like to have the extra man, we know what it's like to have that expectation on us, and a few more of those passes stick. There's a less nervousness around the performance the next time that happens.
The experience of that certainly will stand to them. I think you saw from the Italian game on, when we're playing against 13 men, I think mentally the Irish team thought they could, run around the Italians and there'd be loads of gaps, and there's always going to be a reaction. It's the same in any sport, and you'd be very, very disappointed if you were the opposition coach if that happens to a team that they throw in the towel. I think and England are, they have a lot of top class internationals there and British and Irish lines, and they dug in there and showed a great fight. From an Irish point of view, of course they learn from that. They've got to find a way to control the tempo and pick up the tempo of the game and be accurate and not force passes, because if you're down numbers and you're defending, and what you want the opposition to do is make a mistake, somebody shoot out of line, make a big tackle, get a lift from that, a bit of energy, and they continuously did that, and Ireland kind of forced some of the passes a little bit, whereas it probably would have been more beneficial to hold on to the ball and keep building and building and building. So it's something that, of course, I think they'll learn from. And it wasn't Ireland's best performance. So Ireland can take so much from that game as well. And if we had this perfect performance that we won by 25 or 30 points and were dominant for the 80 minutes, we'd have other issues with that. We'd be blaming the sending off. So, of course, England showed a massive amount of fight. But I think Ireland definitely need to learn from that situation. Where is the space? What kind of process and what kind of change attack do we need to have? How can we be ultra efficient to keep the ball? Because if you keep the ball for a long period of time, the space is going to open up somewhere. It happens when there's 15 on 15. And I think Ireland just got little half breaks, offloaded out of the tackle, weren't ruthless enough and efficient enough, certainly when they got into good areas.
What happened in the scrum, in your view?
In my view, and I watched it back about 5 times, and obviously I'm open to people having a different opinion. I'm sure they will have. I think there was probably 2 out of the 6 were penalties to England. 2 or 3 of them could have been penalties to Ireland, and there was certainly one of them that should have been reset. I haven't got the pictures here to show you and show the viewers and show you the angles, but England were pushing after the ball, after the engagement in every scrum. They were crabbing to the left and then running around the corner. Like, it's very, very hard to do anything about that from an Irish point of view. And they are a very powerful scrum. Genge is incredibly strong and physical and powerful, and Sinclair is as well. A good scrummager, but the question I'll ask is how that's never happened to Ty Furlong before. There's nothing he could have done. Genge was running around the corner, and then Tom Curry or the other flankers were sliding up the side, and he was getting shoulders into the side of the ribs. So I thought Matthew Reynal, it's hard when it happens. It's hard to change it. The perception goes into the referee's head, and England were. They're a very, very powerful scrum. Ireland are missing Andrew Porter and Ronan Kelleher, which they were a big loss. But it just kind of capitulated and went to that stage where Matthew Reynal just kept awarding England all the time. And they weren't all penalties. I think 2 of them were penalties, and there's no way Ireland's scrum will capitulate like that 6 times in 6 penalties. And I don't agree with them, and I watched them back countless times, and I would urge any of the commentators who are going to join in and say I'm wrong, watch them again and watch the angles, watch the overhead camera, and look at the angles that at times Genge and other occasions Sinclair, where their hips are and what angle they're going in at. But I think again, you're talking about a learning curve. Ireland will learn from that, and particularly Dan Sheehan as a hooker. There's a lot of pressure on him. He's big, he's tall, and they've got to find a way to maybe stay a bit tighter and change that picture a little bit when a team are kind of moving around the corner. They didn't just run around the corner. They moved around the corner and then drove at a different angle, which is it's hard to do anything about if it's not refereed correctly. So, and I spoke to a lot of people on this yesterday, and as I said, I watched every scrum numerous times, and I think if Matthew Renell looks back at those scrums and in his review, he'll get different feedback on those scrums.
You could see in the aftermath that the Ireland coaching ticket were very clearly saying, we have a Razzie style video ready to go, we won't be leaking it, but we're going through the right channels, but we will be highlighting all of the issues. I mean, Tyke Furlong did say it in the middle of the game. When this is happening, is there anything else that you can do to...
I think being a bit cynical yourself and getting your wing forwards to maybe slide off the prop and actually drive up into that English wheel may help a little bit. I probably have done it before when I've been in, played matches. Again, it's something that maybe they need to be ready to do, because other teams will try and do it now. Then it's the perception of what the referee will think the next time. But I would ask the question, I would ask people to look at this. How many of those 6 penalties were England actually going legitimately straight? How many? Every scrum twisted to a point, and then the drive came on at a different angle. There was no scrum where, maybe one of them where they got a shunt on, and I think Dave Kilcoyne lost his feet, which can happen to any prop. But look, it's Matthew Proudfoot, their scrum coach, I think had a tactic, and sometimes everyone kind of has tactics in scrums as well about moving their feet a little bit, getting a little early hit, whatever the case may be. And their tactics work for him. And then it just went to the point there where Matthew Renal had this perception in his mind that England had this dominant scrum. And they probably would have had Ireland under pressure anyway, even if the scrum stayed square. But there's no way Ireland's scrum is that bad, even without Porter and Kelleher.
So when you kind of consider that in the context of everything, like is that not this massive kind of ray of hope for Ireland over the next little while? Because what the criticism has been in the past is that Ireland go to Twickenham or some other place in the Six Nations, have a big win on the scoreline, and not much is learned. The feet aren't on the ground anymore. Ireland get carried away. It feels, certainly this morning, as if it's the exact opposite of that Ireland have got the win and are doing anything but getting carried away. In fact, England are the ones who are probably reflecting on this in a more positive light.
They're right to reflect on it, because you have to find some positives, in fairness. But from an Irish point of view, I think you go back to the Grand Slam winning match. It was a fantastic performance, a great win over in Twickenham. Struggled a number of times on 3 occasions there, got well dominated and beaten, and we go there this time and come away with a bonus point win. People say the game was ruined with the sending off. It wasn't ruined. It probably hampered England and changed the game. Would we got the same sort of excitement? Maybe we're better off playing against 15 players and winning those games. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. But look, it wasn't Ireland's best performance, and probably the thing that stands out to me when I looked at the stats and went back on it is 17 turnovers, and that tells you a story that Ireland were a little bit sloppy at times, and sometimes that comes down to brilliant pressure, and England put them under a lot of pressure, which is totally understandable. So I think Ireland can take a fair bit from that, and nobody's going to get too carried away and say we're going to win a World Cup here, because I think it's a very important victory. And I said it before the game, mentally for these players, the result is there now, and people can debate why and how and what happened. But I think from an Irish point of view, it was a big step forward for this group, and a really important one.
When we're talking about not winning this game in the past, is it like under the current coaching ticket, or are they actually, when they talk about it, do they mean that in the previous coaching ticket, when if we'd gone a man up, we would have kept box kicking and not held onto the ball and not tired them out and therefore not won the game. I wasn't quite sure I understood exactly.
I think a bit of both, Chair. I think probably in more in recent times, maybe up to that turn that we saw last year, I think it comes down to confidence. When you're a player out in the field and there's pressure on, it's how you deal with that pressure in your head and how you find a little bit of calmness and a few leaders to speak up and react and keep your composure. I think the reaction in France, in Paris, would suggest that they're pretty mentally strong and in a good place, because that was a game that could have really got away from them as well, and the reaction was superb. When they chased that game and got it back to 1 point against France. I think the same, I was impressed with the mental calmness when England got back to 15-all on Saturday. Just about keeping calm, no panic, and try and get up there. And then the Jack Conan try was obviously vital, and I just think the reaction for the last 10 minutes was very, very important and telling. And you could probably sense that it was going to happen. You asked me a question to start, how did I feel when I was 15-all? I didn't feel great about that, to be honest. And I think a lot of English people would have been very enthused. But there was a kind of part of me thought, yeah, just take control of the game. Even if you could get a couple of penalties here and just move away and win the game by 3 or 6 points. England never really looked like winning the game. And I know they were hampered by the 14 points, but they never had any sustainable pressure in our line. They never looked like, scoring tries from distance. They had, I think, 6 clean line breaks. Ireland had up near 20. Very, very impressive with finding the space and the accuracy. But again, just that last pass, and they could have been more ruthless. And that's one thing they've got to learn from this, is taking your opportunities. They've got to be better at that, much better at that, because when you go to a World Cup in 18 months' time, there might be one chance. If you get into that situation with New Zealand or France, there might be one chance in the game, and you've got to make sure that you take it. So there's no guarantee we will, and we keep talking about the World Cup. It's still going to be incredibly difficult for Ireland to go past, even get to a quarterfinal or go past it. And it's all part of that learning curve. So I think they're in a good place mentally. Do we have concerns about front row depth, more depth in the second row? The half-back situation, a little bit more depth there, and the players behind Johnny Sexton getting up another level, of course. But, we're in a good, decent position at the moment, I think, and hopefully, we're in a stronger position when we go to that World Cup situation.
What changes are you looking to make this week?
I'm not sure. I haven't reflected on the changes to the game yet. But look, I think Ian Henderson will come into the game. He was a little bit rusty, probably over enthusiastic. Gave away 2 penalties, which probably he'd be disappointed at looking back.
I blame Neil Tracy on this show, by the way, for one of those, the latch in the line out to help the extra ballast in the maul. It was something that he had shown and highlighted on his pick 6. It wasn't pick 6, obviously. It was
Side 5.
Side 5. About 2 years ago, it's been an Ireland tactic where you do kind of just illegally nudge in the wrong side, and the referees have obviously cottoned onto it and gone, sorry lads, that's the second time we've done that to the Six Nations, stop doing it.
Yeah, everyone is picking that up, and I think the one where Itoje comes in the line out and holds the ball up and forces them all as well, is something that would be disappointing. Where the blocking was there, but look, he's an incredible player, Maro Itoje, really, really devastating. And if you look at what he did when Gary Ringrose picked up the ball at the ruck, when Caelan Doris's try was disallowed, that he saved a try there, basically. There was a time where you couldn't put your hand through and grab the ball or play the scrum halves hands. You can now when he picks up the ball. There was a bit of debate about that. And what he did was was legitimate. He's a brilliant player. But Ian Henderson, I think, he's a great player for Ireland, has been. But those 2 penalties would be disappointing for him. He'll obviously come in. Do you start Kilcoyne over Cian Healy because it's Scotland? I don't know, possibly. And Jack Corner will certainly be knocking on Andy Farrell's door this week. Not literally, but he'll be in his mind about the performance and the impact he made when he came off the bench. But other than that, I think, Robbie Henshaw, he was outstanding, wasn't he? I think that's a true kind of warrior performance coming on there. Showed his experience, showed his toughness, made some great carries there, even when a couple of balls went loose on the ground. Got over the gain line and was really, really important. But it's a good position because, Bundy Aki and Robbie Henshaw, it's hard to separate them. They're both brilliant players. You'd love to have that kind of that same competition in other areas. The back three were outstanding, weren't they? So I don't see any changes there. So I see minimal changes. Maybe Robbie Henshaw and Jack Conan may come to mind.
I'm just looking at the score when we played them in 2020 in Twickenham. It was 24-12. I don't know if everybody remembers this game, but Ireland scored a try like deep into injury time at the end of the second half to make it vaguely respectable. So we absolutely got annihilated by an England team, and it's not a million miles from. There's a few players so Herring started, but Healy started, Devon Toner started, CJ Stander started, Conor Murray started, Stockdale and Larmour. But apart from that, everybody else is.
It's just half the team, Jerry, named.
Yeah, but in fairness, it is. But Ronan Kelleher was on the bench. Caelan Doris was on the bench. And it wasn't like they were they're not close to the squad or whatever. Obviously Toner's gone.
But what do we expect going to Twickenham any year? No matter how good we are, it's always going to be tough. It's always going to be tough going to Paris, where we're England and France should always be the top two teams. They've more players, bigger leagues, bigger pools of players to pick from. So we shouldn't be finding reasons to be negative around the team here. I think, given you look at the mistakes that were made and maybe things they need to be better at, and Ireland have to be incredibly efficient no matter when they're playing the top teams in the world, because we're never really going to overpower a team and be bigger than them or more physical than them. But there's a lot to be really pleased at. The way Ireland stuck to the plan of still trying to find space, moving the ball, the accuracy needs to get a little bit better on some of those passes. And when the opposition analyse Ireland, they're going to try and break them down and not let them get into multi-phase. So there's a lot to be pleased about, but certainly it was a fantastic win in the end. Nervy in the middle, and maybe if you're being critical, Ireland should have been more ruthless and made it more comfortable for themselves.
All right, Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million. We'll talk to you later in the week. Cheers.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.
It's Alan Quinlan there. Time for the papers.
There are so many idiots out there, so many spoofers. There's a lot of horse.
I think he's a total spoofer.
What do you mean a spoofer?
He's just bullshit.
No, Eamon, come on, don't be, no, I'm not,
yes.
No.
Time for us to take a look at the newspapers this morning. We can start with OTBSports.com. You saw a bit of that Bergkamp in him today. Oh, Kenny Cunningham getting the Arsenal fans excited about Martin Odegaard. Dublin are back. It had a championship feel to it. That is the game yesterday. It was so emotional. This is Andrei Yarmolenko having scored for West Ham against Villa. Great little finish, and then obviously he's in tears on the pitch and gives a fairly amazing interview in the aftermath of the game to Sky as well. There's player ratings from the game, so we're going to bring you through the back pages of the papers. Start with the English ones. Pressure on Jones despite battling display. For all their guts, this England is not yet a good team, says Owen Slott. Brave players deserve better than wild inconsistencies of Jones. That's Stuart Barnes. Chelsea may not be able to pay wages. Thomas Tuchel says, I'll drive to France for the Lille tie if needed. There was some speculation yesterday that actually they've already paid their travel bills for the rest of the year, and so they will be able to travel. So I don't know.
Chelsea.
Let's win this. Farrell wants Ireland to finish with a flourish. That would be good. Dublin's league win accompanied by silence. So the other story that happened over the weekend, almost all of the managers backed up the GPA and decided that they wouldn't do post-match interviews with media as a measure of support for the GPA stance in their ongoing row with the GAA about funding, in particular expenses. A few managers obviously decided they didn't care about that, or they weren't asked, or decided that they were asked, and we don't know what the story is. But most of the managers didn't speak to the press yesterday. It was so emotional for me. It's so difficult thinking about football because every day the Russian army is killing Ukrainian people. This is Andrei Yarmolenko yesterday, reminding us all that we are very privileged to be sitting watching sport on our couches. There's no doubt I stay. Tuchel vows to stay with Chelsea until the end of the season, and Rachel Blackmore adds X Factor to Cheltenham Festival. That's the back of the Guardian. Tuchel calls for greater scrutiny of owners. He's calling for it this week, just not last week. Eddie Jones says the pressure is all on France, and Raducanu beaten by world number 79 is the front of the Telegraph. The other ones, Triple Crown, now the target after Twickenham triumph. They do actually have a trophy for the Triple Crown, don't they? There's like a shield or something.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's
a
Triple Crown trophy.
There shouldn't be though.
Why not?
Because it's not like it's like a special prize.
Ireland can do.
This is elite sport, right? This isn't the school sports day. You don't get participation trophies.
Ireland can do the treble this year, the Millennium Trophy, the Centenary Quack, and the Triple Crown.
Is it Quack?
Quake?
Quaish?
Quaish.
Is it? Real men don't eat quaish. Tuchel pledges to see out season. A crisis hit Chelsea, and Dublin find their voice at last as they look to keep status.
Do we not get a trophy for beating Wales or Italy, actually?
Desi didn't speak. I mean, obviously Desi didn't speak. It would have been wild if Desi didn't help the GPA out. Tears for Fears. Tearful Andrei Yarmolenko scored an emotional goal. That's against Villa yesterday, and that's his celebration. Farrell puts the mute in. Dessie Farrell didn't speak to the press after yesterday's first league win of the year, but the Dublin boss did talk to his county's own media outlet, Dubs TV. Some county managers, including Kerry's Jack O'Connor, Monaghan's Seamus McEnany, and Galway's Pádraig Joyce, did speak to the media. But
yeah, Joyce obviously not a fan of the GPA. I have no interest in the GPA, never had. It's beyond my pay grade talking about the GPA, to be honest. So I don't know, was his response when asked.
But it's not about the GPA, it's about his players.
Yeah.
It's your players who are not getting their expenses. Right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point. Who are not getting what they think they're due. Like, it's not, you're either in support of your players or you're in support of the central body of the GAA. And that's why I'm surprised that any manager would ultimately go against their players.
Yeah, it's an odd one, to be honest. I thought that there was just kind of like a sense of maybe not realising the nature of the situation, that maybe a few managers were kind of very focused on training and they kind of like dropped the ball a little bit at the weekend, but now it feels a few people just aren't on board.
Anthony Moyles is with us this morning. Anthony, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, gents. How are we doing?
We're just talking there about the managers, and some of them talked to the media. Most of them didn't. What the direct quote there from Pádraig Joyce was...
sorry, 2 seconds. I have it here. I have no interest in the GPA. I never have. It's beyond my pay grade to talk about the GPA, to be honest, so I don't know. When asked about the expenses issue, that was his response.
But he did talk to the media, although it seems as if the GPA asked the managers not to talk to the media. It's kind of, it's not really beyond your pay grade, is it?
It's beyond mine, Ger. Look, I think there's always been this really weird relationship with some people and the GPA, in the sense of you have a situation where the situation where, say, even like O'Rourke, I saw a clip of O'Rourke last night on the Sunday game. You know, Tom Parsons was hardly looking at him, and O'Rourke has been a guy who's probably poked the bear an awful lot with regard to the GAA in various different articles. Some kind of fellas would think that the GPA are overstepping their mark. They're getting involved in too many areas. But like the ultimate thing in here is there was a contract which was there. There was an agreement which was there. It changed for COVID, which you can understand, right? But the agreement was that once we got back to a normality with regard to playing and training and everything else, that the agreement that was in place before would be reverted back to, and it hasn't been reverted back to. And I think the GPA are well within their stance, and the players are obviously very annoyed and very frustrated that this is going on. So, the GAA, rather than letting this thing go on and just kind of trying to, I suppose, hold the GPA off at arm's length, need to get a grasp of this, because to be fair to them, they seem to be, emboldened by this, the GPA, and they seem to be, they're willing to probably go to the next level, which you would imagine is some kind of I don't know if it's going to be an all-out strike, but certainly is going to be some type of action.
Yeah, well, let's wait and see exactly what happens, and we'll come back to that, because there's plenty of actual football to talk about at the weekend. I started off on Friday by saying we never talk about Meath. Let's talk a little bit about Meath, because they were pretty good.
Yeah, they were. They were. They won the game in the first half, Ger, really, playing against the Breeze, which is always, pretty ferocious in Navan. Even on a calm day, it can be bad enough. So, they were, I suppose, first thing for them, they were playing at home. Second thing, they as I said, they played really well against the Breeze, moved the ball well, ran at angles, got some nice scores. Harry Hogan in goal has just been a revelation. The way he strikes the ball is impeccable. He's a left-footed kicker. He literally takes 2 steps, be it on kickouts or indeed his free taking, and he's unerringly accurate. I think he got 5 in a row, or maybe 6 in a row. He missed a couple then, but he probably could have ended up with 8 or 9 scores, which is unbelievable from a goalkeeper. As I said, he has that strike where he just stands behind it and bang, you're in no doubt. So we played well, but Cork were absolutely, they were desperate here, really, really poor. A lack of intensity, a lack of tackling, single kind of a lot of individual stuff, even in tackling, a lot of individual man on man, no guys helping each other, no communication, and then completely with a Breeze, isolating guys up in the forward line like Hurley, giving them the ball, and then no runners off them. Forwards gathering the ball inside with maybe 2 Meath men on them. They might get away from the Meath man, and then still no cavalry, no one coming to support. And very, very frustrating. Now it's funny, I thought about it last night, and I was thinking to myself, geez, if maybe the best thing for Cork would be, and I'm not sure about this, but I don't know if they meet Kerry in the Munster, but maybe the best thing for them would be to meet Kerry and get an absolute annihilation, because that's what it would be, and then it might get people in the Cork County Board or whoever in the county to actually stand up and get a hold of this thing, because I feel sorry for the players. I feel sorry for what's going on. You can see that they're trying, but at the same time, it was really bad. So on one side, it was good for Meath that they got a win at home. It'll boost confidence. They got a number of players back, like Brian Menton, and a couple of guys came back in who did well. Morris played well up front. Tomas O'Reilly played really well at centre half forward. I think that's a position for him. He's big and strong, well able to win breaks, and is a good passer of the ball. So I think that's a position that they found. But at the same time, Jerry, you have to look at the opposition and go, Cork were very, very poor. Much better in the second half, to be fair to them. But at that stage, the game was up.
Is it a situation where Keith Ricken is potentially going into this with his eyes wide open and knows that the team wasn't good enough last year and is going to need to throw players into the deep end immediately and experience a relegation or two, well, maybe hopefully not 2 relegations, but experience relegation to Division 3 and slowly build from there?
Yeah, I don't know, Owen, to be honest with you. We're talking about Cork here. And you look at the playing population, you look at the size of the county, you look at everything. Now, of course, you marry that up with the fact of the football has always been the poor cousin, and sometimes when more than not, when the hurling is going well, most of the focus goes there. And you would imagine most of the focus, I don't know this for sure, but there's always been talk that most of the focus from, say, the county board would go there. And even with regard to fixtures and different stuff from a club point of view, some of the football players would be very, very, I suppose, annoyed and aggravated It just seems like the poor cousin to me. The slide, people always would say, if they come up against Kerry in the championship, there'll be a big performance in them. I just don't see it. I just don't see how they would be able to contain Kerry. And as I said, I think it would be a very, very scary proposition for them, because yesterday I watched them and there was very, very little for about 40 odd minutes. And even when they started to tackle Meath a bit more, with a bit more intensity, and they got stuck in a bit more and they showed a bit more passion, they still were pretty devoid of ideas up front. The second half suited them a bit more. They had a bit more of a running game. But I don't know, Owen. No manager wants to go in and say, listen, you know what? We're going to blood players and we're going to get relegated. Ultimately, you want to blood them and you want to see a reaction and you want to try to get a couple of scalps and get a couple of performances. But, it's a very, very tricky situation for them now. Very tricky situation for them, and I suppose Meath were not lucky, but it was fortunate that they met a team who were also lacking in confidence. And once Meath got a bit of run on them in the first half and opened up a bit of a gap, there was really only going to be one winner in that game.
All right, let's talk about the Division 1 games then. Let's start with the best team in the country at the moment, and that's Kerry. Grinding it out against Mayo in difficult circumstances, without Seanie O'Shea, without Paul Murphy. How will they feel after that match in terms of their All-Ireland credentials and everything all the questions that we've had about them over the last couple of seasons?
I think they'll be frustrated, actually. I tell you what glaringly obvious to me is the loss of O'Shea. I thought they were a little bit rudderless in their half forward line. I thought they were not. What I mean there is, I mean at that pivotal 11 position. I'm not saying, I can't remember the guy who came in for O'Shea. Sorry,
Jack Savage.
Yes, correct. I'm not saying that he had a poor game, but he's just not Seanie O'Shea. And he hasn't got that ability to find the pass, but to also drive the players. And he's not a focal point really for the team. So what happened was, I thought there was a lot of there was a lack of urgency sometimes. When they did get the ball in well, it was usually Paddy Clifford trying to find David inside, and he was killing the Mayo cornerbacks and fullbacks, and he was playing really, really well, and he put kind of Kerry on his shoulders for the first half certainly, and for most of the game. But it's something whereby if I was in opposition, you're kind of saying, right, this is something that we can look on. Even if O'Shea is playing, we need to make sure that we do our best to try to lessen his influence as much as possible. Now that's easier said than done, of course, but you have to say, right, we're going to get in his face, we're going to follow him everywhere, because you could really see from his absence that kind of quarterback idea was missing, and hence I just thought it was a bit of a lackluster performance from Kerry. Their defence was good again. I thought we've spoken about this before, how they've sorted themselves out. I thought they were mean. I thought they were decent tackling. I thought their structure was very good. They kept that central column very, very tight, and more often than not, Mayo lads just kind of ran down cul-de-sacs, got stripped of the ball, and I think really Kerry probably should have won that game by more. But in hindsight, then when you come to the end of it, Mayo had opportunities to level it, and even had potentially an opportunity to win it. Paddy Durcan made a couple of wild shots near the end. But yeah, from a Kerry point of view, I'd say it's frustration, Ger. I really do. I think they will come away from that game and say, well, actually, hold on a second, we need to knuckle down a bit more, and we're not really where we thought we would be, because Mayo were good, but their forward set wasn't great. Like Donegal O'Connor had a poor game, very, very, very quiet. Really, the whole game nearly for them rested on O'Donoghue's shoulders. Now he played very, very well, won his own ball, took his own scores, kicked his frees well, and he really impressed me. I wasn't massively a big fan of his, but I thought on Saturday he really grew actually, and he really came of age.
I think Kerry would have been happy enough with the draw actually at the end if it wasn't for the two late freeze gifts given to them by Aidan O'Shea. But I think you thought Aidan O'Shea overall had a good day.
I think O'Shea had one of his best games. I've seen him in a long, long time. I really do. He hardly ever wasted a ball, and I thought he was unlucky. Now, yeah, the drag around, and I thought the one previous to that, where I can't remember, someone jumped over his foot. I thought he was harsh done by on that one. But I thought he had a really, really good game. He was kind of carrying the ball out from the full back line, and he was doing it. Sometimes before, he's done it kind of in second gear, whereas this time he was actually really trying to inject as much pace as he can. And once he was getting into space, and he gets his head up all the time, and he's a very heads-up type of player, and his hand passing is excellent. And also, he attracts players to him then, because fellas want to get a hit on him. So fellas come at him to hit him, and he has the physical strength to either power through them or slip hand passes off and go again. So I was mightily impressed by him, actually. I thought he had a very, very powerful game. And him doing that role, actually, would allow the likes of Keegan and O'Hara and these guys to actually take a bit more of a break, and when they go then to be a bit more effective, rather than having to go every time from the full back line, with say the likes of Ruwan having to go every time from midfield. So I think Horan, whether he plays that role again or not, I thought he was really, really good on Saturday.
Okay, a quick word about the Dubs. We've been saying don't write off the Dubs. Everybody was writing off the Dubs, but they're not back, but they're definitely All-Ireland contenders, right?
Yeah. Well, look, I think we spoke about this on Friday, Ger, and I was just saying that if they go up there and they win this game, it's an enormous fill-up for the team and for Desi and everyone else that will feel that, okay, we've come up here and we've taken the scalp of the All-Ireland champions. Now, I suppose if you strip that back, what happened? Well, they got a number of the players that we discussed that were due to come back. So straight away, those guys, you can see, like literally in an instant when they get the ball, their DNA is so primed to do the right thing with the ball more often than not. So James McCarthy gets the first ball. You see him, if you watch the video of the game, he's standing, there's a bit of a free, he takes off, he burns his man, he runs beyond the player, he gets into possession, he touches the ball around 3 or 4 times, and he just naturally fits back in, and he does the right thing with the ball. The same with Merchant. Robbie McDade, I thought, had an unbelievable game. He gives them that power and pace from the half-back line, which was missing in the last while, where he's able to go beyond players and able to go beyond the opposition defence and really stretch them. And if you watch, they had so many attacks in that first half down that left-hand side. Like, they really obviously focused down there. Then they went down that stand side so much. So, they got players back. I still think there was a little bit of sloppiness in there. There was a couple of pot shots taken, less so than the last time. I think they hit 11 out of 17 in the first half. I think the game, they could have been well out of sight. I think the game was pretty much over at halftime, obviously with the sending off, but they could have been way out of sight because they actually missed a couple of handy ones as well. But there was a definite noticeable difference that they were trying to find the right guys with the ball. I think it was around 13 or 14 minutes. They went down the left-hand side and they sought Costello out. A couple of players, Lahif had a ball or had the ball in his hands. Scully had the ball, but they sought Costello out. They eventually gave it to Costello, and I thought he was really, really good. At a time where the game was only finding its feet, He tore. First thing he had in his mind was just run straight at Kerry or straight at the Tyrone defence, cause guys to miss, and he got some vital scores to kind of settle Dublin. So look, we've spoken about this. They still have guys to come back. Are they the finished article? Not by a long shot, but I thought their defence was good. I think Tyrone, bar that spell in the second half where they kind of kicked a few scores, they never really looked like winning the game, to be honest.
Yeah. Like we were saying earlier, you would make them favourites to win Leinster and they'd be a 1 or 2 point underdogs against Mayo and Kerry in an All-Ireland final if you had to price it up today. But that's it. That's how close they are, as opposed to this absolute crisis-torn, chronically mismanaged group that they've been painted by many.
Yeah, I think so. Look, people just wanted, I suppose, get the story around them, and it did. I suppose if you came over and watched the match and you'd never seen them before and you didn't know much about them and you watched them, say, against Armagh, you go, well, these guys are who? They're meant to be what? Because they were disjointed. They were all over the place. But then you kind of have to look at the amount of players that they were trying to blood, look at players who were necessarily playing out of position, getting game time in different areas of the pitch.
Yeah.
And then, of course...
That's the thing. for whatever reason, Desi has no credit in the bank, even though he has won an All-Ireland, and like they should have won the All-Ireland semi-final last year, but for whatever reason his players couldn't manage a game-winning situation to get themselves through after 76, 77 minutes, and then they would have been in an All-Ireland final. You would have been like, well, that's not bad considering the gazillion All-Ireland winners that they've lost. I don't know, he's not a million miles away from where Jim Gavin was with a much better selection of players in his third season as the manager of the Dubs.
Like, you know, when you go in to manage a team and you've managed, especially, you know, Desi's job where he's coming in after, you know, winning, obviously, the very, very successful situation that Gavin had. You know, and you look at Gavin after Gilroy, you have to bring something different. If you continue to do the same old, and you continue to play in the way that the previous manager, the players will get absolutely sick, you know, to their teeth of it, because they've been doing it for X amount of years. And players want to be challenged. Players want something different. Players want to hear not only a different voice, but they want to hear a different message. And last year, I would say, you know, and even you know, probably previous to that, there was still a lot of remnants of the Gavin era that they were kind of saying, well, listen, we're not going to throw it all away because it obviously works, but what we want to do is we want to try to put our own stamp on it over the next number of years. And I think this year especially, he has tried to do that with his backroom team to really kind of, I suppose, take a brave step and stick to chest out and say, no, this is how we want to play. And how that is they're trying to move that ball much faster into the full forward line by kicking the ball. And they're trying to allow players the freedom, I suppose, to have shots. You know, I looked at some of the games, a lot of them over the weekend, and you know, I watched Donegal Mayo or Monaghan, and like I find myself watching Donegal, watching it. I record most of them because I can't watch them live because they absolutely, I go bananas. I feel like just throwing my whatever boot at the TV. Or you can just fall asleep. You can go out and put the kettle on and come back in, and they'd be probably still tipping the ball across their own 50. So you end up in a situation where you're saying to yourself, like, who's trying to play football here? And I don't care whether you're Meath or even Cork or you're, you know, Tipperary or you're there's some teams who are trying to play the game in a positive fashion, and there's some teams who are still stuck 3 or 4 in that kind of era of 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, which is getting bodies behind it. That's all fine, but then slowly coming out. Like I watched the Donegal Monaghan match. There's an unbelievable number of examples where they're coming out of defence, and instead of passing the ball into space, the player who's, say, on the half forward line runs back towards the man, receives a hand pass off the man, off his shoulder, and then hand passes it back to the next defender coming out. So not only do you receive the ball, you actually go back 20 yards from where you received the ball. So you're basically saying, well, we're going to start again. Now that's fine. You know, it's a slow build up, but it's absolutely like it's just terrible football. So, you know, I look at Farrell and I look at what some managers are doing, and I applaud what they're doing, because I think the game, you know, you were chatting to Alan Quinlan there, like every game evolves, and I think Gaelic football managers are going to have to start realising that actually, you know, we have to be willing to do things. We have to have, say, instead of having one-off runners in the forward line, we have to have 2 guys. We have to have a situation like in the rugby that you're willing to do a handoff and play the ball away out of the tackle, that you're willing to take risks, that you're willing as a halfback or a fullback to come up and take a shot because you've been training so much that you have the ability to do it. And because it's those key moments, and the teams that actually get enough guys that are willing to do that and be able to execute those things at times of pressure, they're the fellas that will win the championships and will win games. That safety first idea of maintaining possession, loads of possession, you know, crisscrossing across the field, that's not going to win you. It might win you some games, but it's not going to win you the games to win in All-Ireland, not in my view.
All right, Anthony, we'll leave it there. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
It's Anthony Moyles giving us some thoughts on the weekend's Gaelic football action. Is there an emergency power rankings required after, like, Cavan ahead of Tip, I think, at half time, and then get blitzed in the second half?
That was a huge win for Tipperary yesterday, because obviously pre-season the expectation was that themselves and Cavan were going to get out of that division, and things didn't go so well for Tip at the start. Beating Sligo, beating Cavan, they're massive wins back to back for them now. So and they needed to win yesterday. I don't think it would have been good enough otherwise. Just on the Dublin point, like, it's very kind of like, it's a simple one, and it's not very incisive. But I wonder if Dessie Farrell has just kind of like looked at last year and said, that didn't work. We're going to do something different. What we know from last year is that they were back training quite early. Obviously, we had the situation pre-COVID. We know that they showed signs of not fatigue, but of maybe being kind of a little bit worn out, mentally at least, in the Leinster Championship, that the collapse in the second half against Mayo wasn't all that of a surprise. I wonder, has he analysed the curve that they went on last year and said, we just went too early? Like, let's not forget they were joint champions in the league last year. This year, clearly they're not going to be joint champions in the league. They're not going to be champions. They're not going to be in the final of the league. They've got lads playing club football over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, James McCarthy played for Ballymun a couple of weeks ago. Conor O'Callaghan played a challenge game. That's where he got his injury. That they've said to the league, listen, screw this. This is not important whatsoever. Even getting relegated to Division 2, not the end of the world. We will be fine as long as we're right for Championship. And it's as basic as that.
That's one aspect to it. I do think it's not about the X's and O's. It's about the Jims and Joes. And they've had none of the players. They haven't had that selection. We've been like, oh, look at that. Who are these players? It's like, literally, who are these players? Because not very many people knew anything about the players who were being blooded. But now you're looking at the team coming back. Like, Robbie McDade was an all-star.
Yeah.
He was that good. Like, people kind of underrate the COVID season that they won the All-Ireland because it was COVID, but you were still playing inter-county, right? It was still one of the All-Irelands that were crediting Limerick with winning, with being like the greatest team since the Kilkenny team. Like, you have to give them credit for that. But the players that they were missing last year because of injuries or the disjointed nature, I'm not saying they're brilliant. I'm not saying they're going to be as good as Dublin under Jim Gavin, because they don't have the same playing pool, but they do have loads of players who are really good still, who we're like, oh, that's not as good, that player's not as good. And it's like, well, actually, okay, so McDade is not quite as good a footballer as the footballer he's replacing in Jack McCaffrey, but he's bloody good. He was an all-star. And he wasn't around last year for everything, was he? Wasn't he injured for most of it?
No, he was. I literally have it in front of me. He came off the bench against Mayo, and again they lost. So I'm not sure was that an injury-based thing before that led him into that. You see, the thing is, like, not having quarterfinals last year, I couldn't tell you what happened in the Leinster Championship.
Yeah,
so.
Okay, fair enough. He's still got players to come back in the forward line in Paddy Small and in Con, right? But the forward line yesterday was Howard, Bugler, Scully, Costello, Kilkenny and Rock. So now they've strengthened depth because they've got those two to come back.
Yeah, obviously the depth isn't what it once was, but again, the bar is just so unbelievably high, and it's going to be important come the end of the Championship. They're not going to need that depth for the first few rounds of the Leinster Championship.
No, and Lee Gannon only came off the bench in the 70th minute yesterday. He's been excellent. Like,
rumours of the demise.
That's it. That's all I'm saying. It's like because everybody wants him, and it's really easy to go, oh, he's not. This is not the same coaching ticket. He's not as good as the previous guy. He's not as good as the previous guy, and the manager's not as good as the previous guy. But actually, he's done a really good job in integrating a new team, because it is a new team, and let's just cool the jets.
Well, the one thing you don't know is about the manager. Like that's a very, very hard thing to actually evaluate. Like how good a manager Dessie Farrell is. It's much easier to look at the players and say they're not as good, and that's all fair game. But it's very hard to know how good a manager otherwise Dessie Farrell is. So for criticising and saying that, could there be a soccer style situation where Dessie Farrell's neck is on the block at some stage of the season, that does seem to have been a bit of an over exaggeration at this point.
Well, so first year wins in All Ireland, second year loses an epic semi final, and third year let's wait and see. Exactly the same course as Jim Gavin, except they got blown out by Donegal essentially when they were 7 points to 1 up. Like, it's almost exactly the same when you think about it. They didn't get blown out in the second half by Mayo. They got blown out in extra time. So maybe it's almost exactly the same. I do
think that people are looking at the 2013-14 Dublin team as a much better team than this current Dublin team.
Yeah.
So
is it easier to do a good job with those players, or is it easier to do a good job with these players? Who had the better hand there?
Well, obviously Jim Gavin did,
but Jim Gavin's the greatest manager of all time, and Dessie's nowhere near him. You can't compare the two of them because this guy's a genius and this guy's not. But hang on a second, where's that?
You're forcing me to argue for a point here that I don't actually believe in that I don't believe Dessie Farrell is a good manager. Things I don't know. I do it anyway, yeah. True, yeah, we do it all the time.
OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. I just do think it's been kind of very, this guy is great and this guy is not great, because we've seen this guy be great, but actually, there was an evolutionary process there where Jim Gavin obviously does become a great manager, but did have better players. So, 4 minutes past 9 this morning. Here's what's on OTB Sports Radio for you today. Colm Cooper is OTB Gold at 1 o'clock. State of the Union at 3 o'clock. Mount Rushmore is Cork at 5. OTB Gold is Jason Sherlock at 6. And tonight the show is live with Joe from 7. Up next, we're crossing over to John Duggan at Cheltenham.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Who knew that we had this much to talk about?
I don't know. Have you ever scored from a corner, Karen? Have you ever taken a corner?
I've never, absolutely not. I only give them away.
Keep up to date with the latest WSL action and the biggest interviews.
Would you encourage multi-sports as long as possible, or what's your view on it now, all these years later?
I think it's benefited me. Definitely there's an age that you need to choose. I didn't have a choice, so it was definitely a sign of the times.
Subscribe to the Koi Gig podcast stream on the OTB Sports app now.
FBD Insurance knows this sound spells trouble for van drivers. But if you're an existing FBD customer, you'll get 15% off a new van insurance policy. It's how we're keeping you and your van on the road. Visit fbd.ie or contact your local branch. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. Terms and conditions apply. 15% discount available on new commercial motor policies only when an existing FBD farm, business, car or home policy is in place. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Commercial motor insurance is underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
All right, it's time for us all to brush up on our Cheltenham knowledge, and I'm delighted to say John Duggan is with us. John, good afternoon to you. Good morning to you. How are you?
Ger and Owen, good morning from Cheltenham. The calm before the storm, lads. Before the storm.
When does the hat make its appearance?
I didn't bring it.
Right? It's like
I decided the hat is going to be a social thing, lads. I'm here for
work.
Hard work, tipping winners, and like there's too much luggage, and it's been so bad, the weather in Ireland recently, that it's been, you can't be wearing one of those hats of slashing rain. It's actually going to be good weather here this week.
Right.
4 millimeters of rain at the weekend, but it's apart from Wednesday, it's going to be pretty dry here. So, and temperatures will rise. So the ground's going to dry out, lads, and we're looking forward to a great week. 275,000 people here for the week, 70,000 a day. Gold Cup Day's been sold out since January. 2 years, as we know, since we've had a festival with crowds. So let's get it on.
I do think the crowds is going to have an impact on champions from the last season, this season. Like, we don't know. There's no obvious horses like Lebeck who you're like, oh, that if he goes off and he arrives, then away we go. But I definitely think it's going to have an impact afterwards. People will say, yeah, the horse got a little bit worked up in the parade ring, or the horse didn't respond well to the atmosphere, because last year there were these little bubbles of Irish jockeys cheering home every winner, and that was it. That was the only noise.
Complete silence last year. And when you think about the Stayers Hurdle on Thursday, Florine Porter won it last year, is the favourite again. And this horse is a little bit quirky, gets on his toes a bit, as does Classical Dream, who's won here at the festival before and has beaten Florine Porter at Christmas at Leopardstown. There are a couple of horses you think, how are they going to react to the preliminaries, going round the parade ring, the paddock, all the people cheering them on. And also John Bond, who's a great hope for England in the first one tomorrow in the Supreme Officers Hurdle. He gets a bit sweaty, so he gets on his toes. So how will he react? Well, a lot of these horses, the worry is that they get too het up, as it were. They waste their energy before the race gets into full go. But sometimes they can use that energy positively, just like a normal athlete would. And when we talk about crowds there, it will be just great tomorrow to see Honeysuckle and Rachel Blackmore win for a 15th time under rules, because Rachel, she had all those successes last year with no crowds. It'd be brilliant to see the roar that would go up if she won and if she's welcome back,
Yeah. You wanted to ask a little bit about the Ireland-England stuff.
Yeah, well, the conversation around this festival, John, at the moment, obviously you would have been covering it in the day of a 3-day festival, and there's some suggestion that it became bloated by becoming a 4-day festival. And we get to the Irish stuff in just a moment, but this idea of a 5-day festival has been mentioned now for quite some time. What's the status of that, and what's the feeling on the ground there about how much that would kind of diminish the lore of this festival?
Well, the status of it is that it's not going to happen next year. But then it'll be under review after next year. So next year, 2023, will be a 4-day festival. When they think about a Gold Cup Day being sold out since January, 70,000 people, a lot of people coming down from London. Thursday is going to be very busy. They've expanded the capacity here in the last few years since they redeveloped the race course. And now it's become a bigger thing. Like, I go to London a lot, and I'll be on the tube at Christmas time and you see the ads for Cheltenham. It's become more than just a racing festival. It's become a really big social thing in the British sporting calendar. So you can understand why, like Royal Ascot, they will be keen to have a 5th day. Obviously, these things are always financial. It's worth a huge amount of money to the local economy, to the jockey club, and you can understand the financial reasons for that. From a competitive point of view, it's got the potential to dilute a race meeting that really probably should be 3 days in terms of its quality. Like tomorrow in the Supreme Novices Hurdle, which was always 20 runners, the massive roar, the going too fast over the first few hurdles, and it would be really just a cavalry charge. There's only I'm looking here, tomorrow there's 9 runners in it. There's only 7 runners in the amateur chase, the last race. The Thursday generally, since they brought the 4 days in, Owen, in 2005 has been a bit of a down day, but we kind of just get air into our lungs in every way before we go again on the Friday. But there is a danger with these things that you dilute the quality of what you're offering with adding more races.
And then on top of that, what you have is a situation where supposedly a lot of English trainers are looking at the challenges coming over from Ireland and saying, not for me, and focusing their devotion on Aintree.
Donald McCain, a classic example of that. He's trained 133 winners in the UK this season, more than any other trainer. He has got possibly 1 horse running at Cheltenham this week, and he's saving his firepower for Aintree, because they know they just can't compete at the moment. If you're looking at the prestigious races, the Champion Hurdle tomorrow, Honeysuckle odds on favourites. The Champion Chase, now there is an English trained favourite for that, Gilligan, for Nicky Henderson, but we have an Ergaman, Chacan Persois, put the kettle on last year's winner for Ireland. Then on Thursday, all the top horses are Irish trained, Flooring Porter, Classical Dream. And then on the Gold Cup day, there's only 1 English horse with a chance, Protectorat. Otherwise, it'll be an Irish winner. So of the 95 runners tomorrow, lads, 49 of them are trained in Ireland, more than half.
Yeah, look, the English-Irish thing, obviously, there's a popular campaign running at the moment that kind of repeatedly points out England don't really care about that. And it actually doesn't seem to matter that much, the England-Ireland thing. We get jingoistic about it. I just think it's a bit of crack, but actually it's far more interesting this week not to chase patriotic money, but to follow the good tips. That's the advice is, don't be just backing something because it's Irish.
No, that's something you think is the best chance in the race. Like John Bond, for example, tomorrow is a full brother to Duggan, trained by Nicky Henderson, who's a great festival record, owned by Jimmy McManus, is English trained in inverted commas. Gilligan came from the Irish Point Field, is trained by Nicky Henderson in England. But I do think we're going to have a very good festival again for Irish trained horses. It was 23 winners last year out of 28. I don't think it'll be as high as that, but we'll definitely have more than the UK-based trainers. But the Irish-English thing, I think, I don't even know if it's a thing anymore. Now, it was a really significant thing. Like, I remember in 1986, I was 7 years of age, watched Dawn Run win the Gold Cup. It was the front story on the 6 o'clock news, the news story, that Dawn Run, this horse, won at Cheltenham. And back then, there's very little for Irish to cheer about in the global sporting stage. Maybe John Tracy or Eamon Coughlin or a couple of Triple Crowns before the soccer team became something. You know, with a lot of people emigrating from Ireland in the 80s especially, who didn't want to. They moved to England, they worked here, and it was a sense of pride if, Ireland were winning at Cheltenham. And that even goes back to the 1940s and Vincent O'Brien. When I came here first 20 years ago, I really felt like, even as a person, intimidated. There was real underdog sense around the place. And if you have a few Irish winners, it would be a real thing that you'd be feeling proud about. But Ireland has conquered Cheltenham. I've seen the whole change of it back from the 2005 when we had 9 winners, which was the best, I think, since probably 1958 or something like that. And then it went to stage in 2013 where we had more winners than the English, and to last year when we had 23 winners. So Ireland has conquered Cheltenham as opposed to being competitive, and it's a very strange feeling. But the Irish-English thing these days is not something that we need to prove anymore.
The spectre of COVID obviously hangs over crowds at Cheltenham and that conversation around it. I presume there's going to be a much different vibe as things seem to have opened up quite significantly.
Absolutely. I think the gap year helped. I think if there was a festival last year with some semblance of crowds, it would have been possibly controversial. We know, having covered a couple of years ago, that I think the general consensus looking back is that the festival shouldn't have gone ahead. But I don't remember a phrase book or a handbook or a guide for a 100-year pandemic that nobody lived through. So I think a lot of decisions were being made in England that were obviously seen to be wrong. I remember the atmosphere completely changing within a matter of days. Leo Varadkar made the announcement on the Thursday, and it was just a case of the Friday, this thing shouldn't have been happening. And obviously, there was pub landlords around here, the people who I stay with, have stayed with for a long time, like passed away from COVID and everything. And it was just a very worrying time for everybody concerned. So, look, it shouldn't have gone ahead. We know that now. Last year it was behind closed doors. Unfortunately, with the world at the moment, Ukraine is dominating everything, and it's sometimes kind of hard to feel like should you be enjoying yourself with what's going on in Ukraine. Tomorrow, the National Hunt Chase, the amateur chase, it's for the British Red Cross. the Ukraine appeal. People will be invited to donate here at the course this week, and life moves on in a way that is not necessarily great with what's going on in the world at the moment. But COVID, I think, is in the rear-view mirror at the moment here.
Okay, tell us 5 quick races to watch out for and why. The Champion Hurdle, obviously, on Tuesday. Everybody's keeping an eye on that one.
Yeah, tomorrow it's 3:30. Honeysuckle, she's won 14 times out of 14. As I said, she's odds on in the betting. She's got everything really. She has a turn of foot. She's got a pace to burn. She showed that around the bend last year. She can also stay because she won the Mares Hurdle here over a further distance. Her last run at Leopardstown was a little bit workmanlike, or whatever the phrase is, because she wasn't brilliant from the last to the line. But the yard hasn't been in the best of form this year. If you picked a year for something to happen to you, Henry de Bromhead had the most magical year last year. He did the trifecta. So he had the Champion Hurdle, Champion Chase, and Gold Cup winners. Then he had the first 2 in the Aintree Grand National. Like he just was a full house, royal flush. He couldn't do any better than that. The only one I think that could put it up to Honeysuckle tomorrow, and I really hope she wins for the image of the sport and for Rachel Blackmore to go back to back, is Appreciate It, who won by 24 lengths in the novice hurdle last year, the Supreme Novices Hurdle, and hasn't been seen since. Trained by Willie Mullins. But I wouldn't be too worried about that, because Willie Mullins wouldn't send the horse here if he didn't think the horse was right. And also, he sent out Quevega 5 times to win on her seasonal appearance at the Cheltenham Festival. So Appreciate It is in that. And there's a few 5-year-olds. Only one 5-year-old has won the Champion Hurdle since 1985. So that would be against the chances of Tihopu and Zana here. But it's all about Honeysuckle. If she performs to her best, she should win.
Wednesday's Champion Chase and Bumper Day.
Yeah, so we have Willie Mullins training 78 winners at Cheltenham, but never the Champion Chase. He's got to beat Shishkin with one of his 2 horses, Energumen, who we know jumps very well, and Shakin Persois. The one question I would have is, Energumen and Shishkin, a lot of us saw that race at Ascot. It was deep ground. It was a tough race. Would it take a bit out of the pair? And that's one thing I'd have to say. Shishkin can also hit a fence, but he's got a turn of foot that is really, really impressive. And he's also won here twice at the festival. Shakin Persois has been a brilliant horse in Ireland, but has never seemed to deliver away from home. Was poor at Sandown earlier this season, was only 3rd in this race last year. They might try and use his jumping to get an advantage, but at the moment he's got things to prove. So Shishkin and Energumen, Shakin Persois, I'd be surprised if one of the 3 doesn't win it. The Bumper was brought in here in 1992 because they wanted to give Ireland something, because we had no winners at the festival back in 1989, and it's become it's all about what I'm about with racing, the phone calls, the kind of the whispers, what's the potential of this thing? It's a 2-mile flat race, as we know, no hurdles or fences to be jumped. Facile Vega is a son of Quevega and has been exceptional at Leopardstown. But Redemption Day is stablemate, also won very easily the last time. And American Mike from the Gordon Elliott yard. Gordon's obviously back in the festival this year and looking to have a good week with Tiger Roll also on Wednesday. American Mike hasn't run since Christmas at Navan, but is also a very well-touted horse. So that's the Bumper on Wednesday.
Okay, and the Stairs Hurdle on Thursday is the big race today?
Yeah, that's the 3-mile championship for hurdlers. I think this is open, Ger and Owen. Like, you got Flooring Porter, as we mentioned there, owned by lads who are involved in the carpet shop and a pub out west. Great story. Gavin Cromwell trains that, but can be a bit buzzy. Classical Dream, Champ, who used to be a chaser. Time Hill is a consistent horse. Royal Kahala, trained by Peter Fahey and Monaster Revan, who likes probably softer ground that he's going to get here. It's wide open, I think, that one. I don't think I've ever backed the winner of that race. I don't like that race.
The Gold Cup?
The Gold Cup, look, it's going to be an Irish winner, I think. Galvin is an improver for Gordon Elliott, will stay the trip, won a longer distance race last year, beat a Plutarch at Christmas. Plutarch, I think, is the class horse in the race. Will he get the trip under Rachel Blackmore? That's the thing. And Manella Indo is coming back into form, ran poorly at Kempton at Christmas, but Manella Indo is the defending champion. He'll definitely be one to have on the right side, I think, as will Alboom Photo. A 10-year-old, though, hasn't won the Gold Cup in 24 years, and Alboom Photo is rising 10 now, has only run once rather in Tremor since he last ran in the Gold Cup. So maybe ages against him. So Galvin, a Plutarch, Manella Indo, probably the top 3. I wouldn't be surprised if the winner comes from them.
Let's get some Willie Mullins here. You've been talking to him. This is specifically about Tuesday's racing. Have a look.
Allaho, is it just a case of just keeping it simple and doing what you did last year?
I hope so. He looks like, I think he's probably a banker in a lot of people's minds. When you take it that, people probably go to Cheltenham with 2 or 3 bankers, maybe, and they don't always win. So, you've got Honeysuckle, Allaho, and maybe the horse in the Bumper, so maybe 2 out of those 2 out of 3 usually get beaten. The week before Cheltenham, we all think this can't get beat, that can't get beat, but they do get beat, and that's why you have bookmakers. And hopefully he can repeat the dose this year.
Is he your best chance in your view?
I imagine himself and Facile Vega must rate our best chances. Yeah.
Where does Willie Mullins rank in the hat game, John?
Better than me.
Right. Who is known to be like the most capable of rocking a hat in terms of?
I think Willie Mullins. He's got the brown hat. He's able to carry it off very, very well.
Okay.
The hat I think I bought, which I actually bought here, I bought it for about $20. I think is a bit too big for me. So look, I might buy another one. I might buy JR and Owen. Actually, JR, I'll buy if I've got a good week, right? I've got a load of sterling in my pocket. If I've got a good week here, I'll buy the pair of hats and you can wear them for the entry of the Bunches preview.
Not a hat guy. You need to know when you're not a hat guy. That's rule number one of.
Jerry, are you a hat guy?
Maybe you just never had. I'm a beanie hat. Yeah.
Who are the other runners and riders then behind Willie Mullins for like being the top hat wearers at Cheltenham?
Top hat wearers. Nicky Henderson wears a good hat, generally a brown hat.
Okay.
Don't remember Gordon Elliott wearing a hat.
No. Or Rich Ritchie, was he wearing a hat? Is he a hat man?
Well, Rich Ritchie, yeah, like he's got the sunglasses as well on the hat. So now I'm not a sunglasses man. I can't carry off sunglasses at all. I don't know about you, Owen, when you're on your American trips or Jer. But
you can do sunglasses, not hats. Big difference. And I was just going to ask then, in terms of what happens. Like, I mean, you're going to deliver us with fantastic tips all week. We're going to make a lot of money thanks to you, John Duggan. How will you be enjoying the fruits of your labour on a nightly basis in Cheltenham?
I'll be literally studying form and getting, like Homer Simpson's accountant, into a degree of edge around the fact that I haven't been tipping enough winners than I should have. I will celebrate Cheltenham when I get back home.
Right.
Is the way I'm kind of thinking about it, and like it is something that I've always missed out on. But like these are the decisions you make, because if you're in the firing line of people's opinions, you have to try and just try and really get to the bottom of the form book. As boring as it sounds, and it really is boring, because there is a great nightlife here. People have a great time. Some of the hostelries here around here are beautiful. And if you're an ale drinker like I am, it's Bob's your uncle.
Are you kind of like Jose Mourinho peering through the curtain at 9 o'clock every single night, thinking, God, I wish I was out there?
Well, I thought Wenger was a voyeur, but rather than Jose Mourinho. No, it really is. There's so much opinion. There's so many things I've subscribed to, lads. The one thing I would advise folks is, don't get bogged down in the preview night circuit and the chat about these things this kind of thing being a certainty. Don't bet when you drink. Obviously, bet within your means, and get everything done in the morning, because I think your own opinion is the best opinion. It is called jumps racing for a reason, and I do think you need to be on with good jumpers. You need to be able to be horses with that jump. Cheltenham is quite a tight track. They're always turning and twisting, and you got to be able to have a horse that travels well, that jumps well. The ground will dry out here, which horses appreciate better ground, and horses so many times come back and show their best form at this track, because the track is so unique, and the festival form from previous years is definitely worth counting. But I'm going to bore you. I'm sure we'll have a night out to celebrate Ryan Brem's win shortly in Dublin. But there'll be no John Duggan or Don Juggan behaviour or Doug Joggin behaviour this week.
Don Juggan, I mean, I am Matthew Fitzpatrick, Patrick Cantley, Brooks Koepka, Emiliano Grillo. Those 5 names are on the list now, and as well as Don Juggan on the list of people that
well, they're probably in the lake. They've been in the lake so many times with their shots in the Players' Championship 17th hole the last few days. Who's going to win that? I don't know. But yeah, look, I just hope we've got have a good week, and that people enjoy themselves, and we have a few good winners, Irish winners, and some good storylines. I think one of the things that was clouded by last year, lads, was the amount of small trainers that winners. Remember, you had Heaven Help Us, you had Paul Hennessy on Friday Night Racing just before he won a 33-1 shot at Cheltenham. Peter Fahey had a winner, Belfast Banter, and you'd hope there's some more of those stories Flooring Porter this year,
100%.
As apart from the big names and the big yards and the big owners.
All right, we'll let you go today, John, but thanks very much for that. John's been with us every morning
yourselves.
From 9 to 9:30 throughout Cheltenham here on OTB AM, and of course you'll be able to read his stuff on otbsports.com. A reminder, OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. It is time for us to turn our attention to the weekend's football. I'm delighted to say Adam Pope is with us of BBC Leeds. Adam, good morning to you.
Morning, lads.
What an end to a game. So if anybody hasn't seen this, because there was so much football all over the weekend and there were so many storylines happening, Leeds versus Norwich, Leeds played quite well, I thought. Created. I've only seen the highlights now, but created loads of chances, hit the bar, and then in stoppage time conceded. And it's like, oh no, this is the bit where we actually know the story is written. It's fated. They're going down, but it's not true. They scored a last-minute winner.
I tell you what, honestly, by half-time, guys, they could have been 6 up. They had a good shout for a penalty, but they missed. I think, honestly, a handful of really good chances. So what we'd seen against Villa on the Thursday was it was a 180 degrees turn. Everything that Jesse Marsh wanted to happen happened. But it was classic, and we've seen it under Bielsa, have all the possession, all the chances, don't score enough goals. Did they get the one? The big key moment for me was losing both Rodrigo on the hour and Bamford on 45 minutes. Bamford hasn't started for 6 months. So there was definitely a switch in the type of play from there, and they allowed Norwich back into it. And then suddenly, the sort of inevitable happened. But wow, what an end. I mean, literally the board for 6 minutes at a time went up. Norwich had scored, the life had gone out of the place, and then, of course, a Brazilian, bit of brilliance, and then, Gelhardt scores a winner. And, we had a couple of those sort of moments under Bielsa, late winners where they beat Villa away and Blackburn at home in the Championship. But this was extraordinary because of what was at stake. It was a phenomenal end to a game. But hey, we had one guy message us with his heart rate. He was at 210, he said. So, it was unbelievable, honestly.
Is Bamford injured, or was that like, we're going to give you 45 minutes to ease you back in? What's the long-term or medium-term or next week prognosis for him?
Yeah, no, I think he's looking okay for Friday. It was literally a case of, look, he can give us 45 because, let's say, he's played that one game where he came on for 20 minutes against Brentford and scored, but Newcastle away was the last time he played in a draw, and that's 6 months ago. So he just sort of ran out of steam. You could see he was blowing. Rodrigo's just done his quad a little bit, but I think he may well be okay. He didn't describe it as an injury as such, but he had probably his best game. I'm not saying overall for Leeds, but certainly this season. I think playing with sort of 2 strikers probably suits him. But, he was controlled aggression as well from him, as well as some brilliant sort of creative play. So, but the presence of Bamford guys was so important. He was occupying, defenders and was the focal point for anything coming forward and brought people into play and should have scored himself. And you realise just how much they've missed him.
The atmosphere around Leeds has been one of the things that we've talked about most since they've come back up, and even when they were charging up with Bielsa. When Bielsa got taken away, we weren't sure what was going to happen. So how important was it to get one of these statement wins? It's not a statement win, but maybe a signature late, last minute, last gasp. It just gels everybody together for at least the next few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the nature of the victory, the way it's done like that, people talk about it for ages. But look, if it had been a 1-0 victory from the first minute, it would have been just as important for Jesse Marsh, I would say, and obviously for the club. Look, the way it's gone since Bielsa has been sacked, is that there's been a massive period of mourning for a lot of fans, and a lot of fans don't agree with the decision and still don't agree with the decision. And obviously then 2 defeats under Jesse Marsh, and the second one was dreadful, to be honest, against Villa. Then people start questioning his credibility, and they start examining in microscope sort of analysis of what he's been saying and how he says it and everything. All the negatives start coming out very quickly, and the board were under big pressure the other night against Villa. They were literally getting verbal abuse from, a lot of fans as they were sort of leaving the ground at 2-0 and obviously at 3-0. So this was a massive moment for Jesse Marsh, and when it went to 1-1, you just thought, oh no, this is going to be so negative and get really toxic, this if we're not careful. So it's a huge thing, and I think it is fair to say it's a statement win because it just restores everybody's faith that little bit more going into the next game, which is Wolves away.
What's been the overarching change under Marsh?
Well, the first thing for me, having seen a bit of training as well, is that it isn't man-to-man. That's the big thing. So when they go and reclaim the ball, there is a press of sorts, but they try and swamp whoever's in possession of the ball with several men. And then what that does do, it can leave one side of the pitch a bit open, and obviously the better, Premier League sides can switch play, and Villa, found a lot of space on Thursday night. It's still very, very intense. They're much more compact out of possession because they're not, man for man. So there's a lot of pluses to it as well. But at the moment, you can still see, until they start implementing it properly, that, you can get at Leeds as well, which you could do under Bielsa, of course. But going forward, they're still very exciting. But what I would say, it's a lot narrower. and they get in towards the penalty spot a lot quicker rather than relying on massive width, which is what, Bielsa did. But so it's going to take a little bit of time to get used to, but you're still going to see a very intense Leeds United, and that's going to be pleasing on the eye to an extent. And they're not afraid to go a little bit longer as well. And clearly with Bamford there, then that's something they've got in their armoury. But by the end of the game yesterday, when you haven't got Roderick, you haven't got Bamford, and you've still got Dan James and, a relatively small sort of front line, then it becomes very difficult, I would say. So, again, the key is to have these key players fit. And let's be honest, under any other manager than Bielsa, they're going to have to add to the squad in the summer because it just isn't big enough or deep enough.
Is there going to be resources available to do that if they stay up?
Well, it's an interesting thing. If they stay up, you'd think so. Because, look, the plan is that the San Francisco 49ers, who've got 44% of the club, it looks like they're going to take over at some point. Now, would go into the championship, stop that and leave their stake it is? I don't know at this stage, but there has to be resources available because there's a new manager in charge. And look, and also I think a lot of this squad have, after sort of 3.5 years of Bielsa, probably got to their limit as well. So that there has to be some injection of cash if Leeds are going to go to the next stage, which according to the current owner, Andrea Radrizzani, is to hit Europe within 3 to 5 years. Right now, they've got to stay in the division. They have to do it with the resources they've got, of course, but there has to be a reshaping in the summer. Otherwise, you stand still at the very best or go backwards. And if you don't go down this season, you go down the next. So if Leeds are going to survive and progress in the Premier League, there has to be some form of injection into the squad.
Is there an automatic trigger for the takeover, or is that kind of TBC in the future, depending on what happens?
Yeah, I think it's TBC. It's just been a gradual creep over the recent years, to be honest. So the details of the contract we've never seen, but I'd say there's another important aspect to it as well, guys, is that the 49ers, we were told quite clearly by one of the directors, Parag Marate, that they have a stake in the ground as well, which is a separate company to the football club itself, both owned by Andrea Radrizzani. So their reach is long here. They want to make that ground it's 38,500 at the moment. They want to make it into a 60,000 seater, and there's a lot of development to go on there. Pete Lowy, who has been responsible for some huge, through his family, some huge structures in the UK, like Westfield developments. Like in London, you can see them near the West Ham ground. There's one in Bradford. He's involved now too. So with that in mind, there's a lot at stake here as well. So whether there's a trigger point, an amount where they go, right, we're going to offer you X amount and that's it, it's ours, I don't know. But certainly I think they're in the prime position to go and do this. And I would imagine it'd happen sooner rather than later. I just wonder how much of it depends on the status of the club in terms of its league division. I did wonder what involvement they would have had in the arrival of Marsh, and it's very easy for us to go, oh, he's American, they're American, there must be some kind of link. But I mean, is there some kind of link? Is it that they want to go that general direction? Well, that's really interesting. I very much feel that the appointment was Victor Orta's and the current sort of board. They've been following, and Victor Orta's director of football. He's been following Marsh for a couple of years. So I don't think it's a 49ers appointment as such. And to be quite honest, Marsh was very clear, apropos almost nothing, in his first major press conference to say this is not an Americanization of the club. Now, he just came out with that and he just wanted to get that message across. So, look, obviously they will have had some say in it. There will have been discussion over it. But I do know that Victor had looked at him for a good couple of years. So it was always the plan that he was going to come in this summer by the looks of things, because it was clear that the club was going to go a different direction from carrying on with Marcelo Bielsa, whether Marcelo wanted to stay or not. He only signs 1-year deals at a time. So it was clear that Marsh came in 12 games earlier than he was expected to, but certainly he was their man. And there was we were told recently by the chief executive that it was a unanimous decision that he was the best candidate for the job as well. So there must have been some input for the 49ers on there, but essentially I feel it was a present setup at Leeds decision under the director of football. All right. All of the good stuff that the 49ers have been credited with over the last couple of years has been generally landed at the door of Parag Marate. He's the kind of contract genius who signs players up to deals that tend to be team friendly, and he's generally lauded as one of the smartest executives in the NFL. So if he was to be more centrally involved with Leeds, you would think that the business side of Leeds will be well looked after, and then it's just making sure that the stuff on the pitch matches that. It is, and I think to do the latter, then, the 49ers, they'll admit that, they're not football people in that sense. So they would need people that would know what they were doing on the ground. So you think that people that are in position could stay, or will they bring other people in themselves? But you're right about Parag Marathe. He was very, very well known for his contract negotiations, what have you. But essentially what he's doing is, through the 49ers enterprises, is collecting, investors into various projects. This one happens to be Leeds United. But Pete Lowe is the interesting one for me. As I say, the guy who's behind Westwood, he's based in LA. The family is Australian. He even does a bit of stand-up comedy as well, does Pete Lowe, but he's a big Leeds fan too. He's been a Leeds fan since the 60s. He's been over recently too, and I think it's really interesting seeing his involvement. And he clearly has an affinity with the football club, not just not the bricks and mortar of Ellen Road. So I'm wondering if he will become one of the main players going forward. But right now, honestly, with the way that that the division is in the balance, and the whole relegation thing at present. Do things get put on hold? Do things wait a little bit longer, or do you just forge ahead? And that's really interesting, because you just feel that there's like a slight shift in attitudes at the moment, and whether the current setup will continue as a nice sort of amicable sort of arrangement, or whether there will be some swinging changes in the summer.
Well, we'll see. Adam, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Pleasure, guys.
It's Adam Pope giving us some insight into the goings on at Leeds at the moment. They've given themselves every chance of survival with the win at the weekend. A reminder, OTB AM is brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. We'll be back at Cheltenham tomorrow for a full preview of tomorrow's card with John Duggan. More reaction from the Rugby and GAA weekend, and maybe an emergency power ranking.
Yeah, let's do it for sure.
Okay. We're going to talk Champions League as well, and it's another opportunity to look back on a remarkable hat-trick from Cristiano Ronaldo. Whatever treatment he was getting for his hip flexor, obviously it was very flexible at the weekend.
It was the most flexible hip flexor I've ever seen.
Reflexed.
It was flexed as hell.
We're leaving you with some reaction to the weekend sport. Here is former Derry footballer Conleith Gilligan talking Tyrone-Dublin. And first, Kenny Cunningham on Arsenal's brilliant run of form.
Arsenal 2, Leicester 0 in our commentary game. Kenny, Arsenal into the top 4 and fully deserving of all 3 points today?
Yeah, that's an easy statement to make. Yeah, better team. Leicester, as predicted, we were hoping for more, but we shouldn't have been too surprised. Off form, a little bit out of sorts, sums up their season, and Arsenal just too good on the day without being at their best, Nathan.
We spent a lot of time at the Emirates, I think, around this stage of the season over 5-6 years, where it felt as though the season was petering out. There wasn't much happening. You could sense right from the start today the atmosphere is different. There's a belief in these players. What's changed? What is it that Mikel Arteta has done that has put them in a position where Champions League football feels like a real possibility for this group now?
Yeah, I think just personnel for me, and the setup of the team. The big weakness in this Arsenal team for some years now has always been kind of the defensive attitude of the players, but certainly the defensive partnership. They've never had a parent of any real stature. Looks as if they've gone some way to addressing that. The purchase of Ben White in the summer. Gabriel looks as if he's finding a little bit of form and a bit of confidence alongside Ben White. But I think it's the whole defensive unit. Kieran Tierney's as good as anybody in the league. Tomiyasu as well come in and is really impressed. Ramsdale gives a real air of kind of calmness and authority behind them. And even in front, Partey's presence as well. And just the attitude of the players out of possession. They're working very hard for each other. Arsenal now, Nathan, don't carry any players out of possession of football, and that hasn't always been the case. I think the attitude of players previously in terms of the defensive side of the game has been questionable. So I give credit to Arteta for that. He's placed huge demands on the players and they've responded. But I think it's really the development of the young brigade of players at the football club. I'm talking Saka here in particular, Martinelli and Smith Rowe. These players who haven't come into the football club for huge fees. Odegaard has, he's probably the exception. But that wealth of attacking talent now, which they have in the squad, that really means they stand out from the teams in and around them in the league. Those players are only going to get better over the next couple of years. The big challenge for the Arsenal board maybe would be to actually keep these players out of the hands of so-called bigger teams. But if they can, and if that group of young players in particular can be allowed to develop with some good acquisitions around them, then certainly I think the future for Arsenal Football Club is very positive and optimistic.
There seems to be a real trust around the club, both between the supporters and the players and amongst the players. When you look at the style of football they're playing, Leicester had a huge amount of possession at times in that game. You'd look at a 10-minute spell and they'd have had 85-90% possession. But the Arsenal supporters never got frustrated. They always knew, actually, that Arsenal were biding their time, their structures were right, they were holding their lines of 4, and then when they win the ball back, they're absolutely electric.
Yeah, well, I think that's the difference with this Arsenal team. They can sit deep in that low defensive block because they're comfortable in their defensive setup. If you haven't got confidence in your defensive setup, you feel nervous when you're defending on the edge of your box. This Arsenal team don't. They can drop off. They almost invite you onto them. They want to open up those spaces in behind opposition teams. We can see the pace of Martinelli and Saka in particular on the counter-attack. But also they get on the front foot as well. It's not as if they haven't got players who can get on the ball and dictate. Xhaka's comfortable on the ball. I'd say Partey's probably more functional in that area of the pitch. All their responsibility is in that central area is just to feed the ball to those attacking players. Odegaard in particular is playing that number 10 role, isn't he? Just kind of drifting between the lines. I think every time Xhaka and Partey gets the ball, I think the instruction is just to get him, just keep punching those 10, 15-yard balls into his feet. And once he gets turned, Nathan facing the opposition goal, then things start to happen. He's looking for Saka. He's looking for Martinelli. Not so much Lacazette, to be honest with you, in behind. He's a little bit reluctant, Lacazette, nowadays to run in behind, wants the ball to his feet, wants to knit things together. I mean, that's not unusual in the modern game. We're used to seeing centre forwards dropping off the front, but got real variation to their attack and real kind of pace and dynamism as well. So we're an exciting team to watch, Arsenal, when they get on the front foot, but they've also got that little bit of more defensive solidity and organisation, which we haven't seen before and which has been their downfall.
The 4 of those exciting players, the 3 who started, Odegaard, Martinelli, Saka and Smith Rowe coming off the bench. There's not many teams, if any, in the Premier League who have so much young, exciting, attacking talent. Odegaard was the one who maybe stood out the most today, and you're talking about him there. He deserves an enormous amount of credit when you think he's still only 23, but going to Real Madrid when you're 15 years of age, the weight of expectation, there was a feeling he'd become the best player in the world. We know it never works out like that, but he's managed to keep it together, and now he's probably just developing at a time when you'd expect him to be developing.
Yeah, I think it's been a good move for both parties. I think it's been a good move for Arsenal, but it's been a good move for him. I think Arsenal have rescued him, to be honest with you, Nathan, albeit it took a big fee to get him there. I think his problem, I look at Odegaard, to be honest, Nathan, I see a player probably can only play in one position, that number 10 position, that kind of Bergkamp position. Probably saw a little bit of that Bergkamp playing him today, kind of drifting between the lines, playing at his own pace, almost dictating from that number 10 position, which is exactly what Bergkamp used to do. I think at Real Madrid, if you look at the way they've played the past couple of years, don't really play with a 10. You have to play off the wide areas or playing a midfield 3 at Real Madrid, and that's not his best position. So I think it just suits him at Arsenal, just dropping in behind Lacazette, and then with the help that he gets from the sides, the likes of Martinelli narrowing up and Bukayo Saka looking to play those little combinations, he looks really comfortable in that environment.
The race for the top 4 then, it's in Arsenal's hands. They're a point ahead of Manchester United. They've 3 games in hand, but they still have 12 games to go. There's still a third of the season essentially still to play, and they're probably going to enter a different phase now over the next couple of weeks where the pressure is going to be on. They're going to go from being the hunters to being the hunted. How big a challenge is that for them, and how do you feel that's going to sit with an Arsenal that, like, flaky is the word you would use for Arsenal for 5, 6, 7 years at this stage? Do you think this side is past that?
I'd be more confident, but you're right. I think that's the question around these young players. They are very inexperienced. There's no doubt in their individual qualities. We've seen that all season. We've spoken about the players in particular, but it's kind of the mental aspect, the psychological aspect of the game now, how they cope with that pressure and the demands between now and the end of the season, particularly now as they're sitting in that 4 position. A lot of people will be making them clear favourites now with those games in hand. I don't quite see it like that. I think it's a lot closer than that because of the nature of those games that they have in hand. Liverpool, Chelsea, I think Tottenham that you've mentioned, they're not easy. Yeah, exactly. Huge games coming up. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We're really going to see players are going to be tested now in terms of kind of their mental strength going forward. But I would be confident because they are in a good place. They're playing well, and some of those younger players do play with a lot of maturity. Saka in particular, for me, I've spoken about. Even Smith Rowe for me is a player with kind of an old head on young shoulders. So those attributes will serve him well between now and the end of the season. But it's a small squad. It's not the strongest in depth. And people might say a little bit of luck, key players between now and the end of the season. If they were to lose maybe Thomas Partey for any significant amount of time, if Ben White was to pick up an injury and miss a month of the season, that could prove crucial as well. You know, keep the majority of that squad fit between now and the end of the season, they'll never get a better chance.
And in terms of long term, well, maybe a huge amount of it depends on Champions League football and what they can go and invest during the summer. Is it the number 9 role that should be the key focus this summer? Does a better quality than Alexandre Lacazette transform this side from being maybe Champions League position contenders to be title contenders? Are they still a million miles away from that?
I think there's some way away from being title contenders, but just to maintain their position in the top 4 and start to push towards that top 3, I think they do certainly need investments in key areas. Centre forward's an obvious one. I think they tried to do it on the transfer window. They tried to get hold of Latovic. I thought would have been a very good signing for them for a lot of reasons. Weren't able to get him, so I think they'll have to invest again in terms of centre forward. Lacazette for me isn't the future. I think Arsenal have actually seen the best of him. I think they need to invest in that area of the pitch. I'd like to see him invest again in centre midfield. I think they could do with another top-class centre midfielder and even centre half as well, right down the spine of the team. I think there's a decent pair being established at centre half, but I don't think you can just have 2 in that area of the pitch. They got Holding there as a backup, I understand, but you look at the like of Liverpool and Chelsea and even Manchester City, I mean, they have 4 top-class like centre-halves in that area of the pitch. Xhaka as well in centre midfield, I'm not a big fan of. I think they could do better there. So I think really down the spine of the team for me, if I was being a little bit greedy from an Arsenal perspective, that's where I'd be looking to spend my money. Centre-forward, centre midfield and centre-half. Being 3 players in, that's easier said than done. You're laughing, I understand what you're saying, but those players are out there, and if they could push, get a few out the door, get a bit of money in, and do a little bit of a astute business, then they'll be in a very good place going forward.
It feels as though it's between Arsenal and Manchester United now. They had a huge win yesterday against Tottenham. Cristiano Ronaldo with the hat-trick, and this maybe both things can be right, that Cristiano Ronaldo is still a fabulous finisher, but that Manchester United will be a better team if he wasn't there. That is the big debate out of this. Like, you know, every time he scores a goal, it's how can you be critical of Cristiano Ronaldo when he does things like he did yesterday? Where do you stand on Ronaldo and where he fits in, and how much of an asset he is to Manchester United?
Well, we know the qualities that he brings. That was best displayed yesterday in terms of the quality of his finishing. He's absolutely lethal. So that's unquestionable. In terms of how the new manager, whoever he is, when he comes in, how he wants to play, how he sees Cristiano Ronaldo's role in the team, I'm not so sure. We know the modern manager now coming in, the demands, well, I spoke about Arteta, the demands he places on his players out of possession. I'm sure the new manager comes into Manchester United will be very much the same. I'm not sure Ronaldo's given out a few vibes of delay. I'm not exactly sure the kind of short to medium term he sees himself in Manchester United, even still. But I still think he can make an impact between now and the end of the season. If you look at Arsenal and Manchester United at the moment, it's difficult to make an argument for Manchester United actually coming out on top of Arsenal. The consistent level of Arsenal's performances, the run that they're on at the moment. Manchester United, feast or famine, you literally don't know what you're going to get. Seems like turmoil at one moment at the football club. The whole dressing room's imploded, but yet they turned up yesterday and put in that type of performance, albeit Ronaldo was at his very best. So although it's difficult to make a strong argument for maybe Manchester United coming out on top of Arsenal, it's just a bit of a gut feeling. You just sense as if there's still something there. There's still a heartbeat in that Manchester United dressing room that they could still maybe pull themselves together and put a type of run together that could still maybe make up that gap with Arsenal and take that last Champions League position. It'll be fascinating to see.
You're saying Kenny Cunningham never hopped off to Portugal when he wasn't picked for a game?
Core Town, maybe, but that'd have been about it. No, exactly. That's all part of it, isn't it? Ronaldo, he's not happy. He's not happy when he doesn't play. This is the problem you have when you bring a player like that into the football club at his stage of his career. Cristiano Ronaldo hasn't signed for Manchester United to spend time on the bench. You have to understand that Pochettino's finding that situation at PSG in terms of Messi and Neymar in particular. So that's something which the new manager coming into Manchester United is going to have to wrestle with. That's why he's got to be a strong personality. He's got to be able to front out a few of those players in the dressing room and do what's right for the football club. But that's in the future. It's about the here and the now. And like I said, that's a hell of a race now between Manchester United and Arsenal. There's a couple of other teams in the running a few weeks ago, wasn't it? You mentioned Spurs yourself, but you're right. I think that defeat yesterday for Spurs really puts them out of the running. West Ham as well. It's really a 2-horse race now between United and Arsenal.
And just to touch on relegation, we didn't see Everton today, but beaten again. It's now, I think it's 2 wins in 19 matches for Everton. Leeds got a late winner. Watford won today. The cliche is they're too good to go down, but the argument is, well, then you're too good to be in a relegation scrap in the first place. Yeah. How much trouble are Everton in right now?
Yeah, I think it's about, well, 5 teams are in a lot of trouble. I think those back-to-back wins from Brentford have taken them out of the equation. Newcastle likewise, and all those teams below them. I think it's the 5 teams. They're all in trouble. That was a big win for Leeds today, Nathan. I watched them midweek. They were literally all at sea. Losing to Aston Villa at home, they looked absolutely rudderless and devoid of confidence in that game, but they've bounced back today, got a last minute winner, so that lift the whole football club. Burnley looked as if they were putting a bit of a run together to get themselves out. They've dropped back as well. Watford, you'd written them off a couple of weeks ago. Suddenly they found a win from absolutely nowhere yesterday, and you're right, Everton are bang in it. You're absolutely right. Of course they're not good to go down. Big problem they have. We're talking about Arsenal in terms of the strides they've made in central defence, how much more solid they're looking. For Everton, it's the opposite. They've got a gaping hole in the centre of their defence. Michael Keane, the most experienced defender, Lampard's had to take him out of forward line. Really struggling, he's lost his confidence. Really struggling in that area of the pitch, and even other players as well. Calvert-Lewin's come back into the team. He's been very quiet, Nathan. That's a lad who was exceptional early part of the season. He needs to find his form quick. Still feel as if Everton will have enough to get out of it. Like I said, probably similar to Manchester United, more of a gut feeling when it comes to Everton. But yeah, it'll be fascinating. It'll be more twists and turns between now and the end of the season. It's great. It's great. We're still talking about a battle for the title, a battle for 4th place, and of course those 5 teams, it looks like now battling for those 2 remaining places, which will keep them in the Premier League.
Great stuff as always, Kenny.
Full time here in Healy Park, Omagh, where Dublin have got their first win of the 2022 Alliance League. Conleith Gilligan, former Derry footballer, Amanda has won 2 league titles before. Dublin are back. We saw a bit of a swag there today. How impressed were you by their performance?
Yeah, I thought particularly their first half performance was very impressive. 5 out of the 6 forwards scored. They were very good in front of goal. They stopped taking silly shots, and as impressive as those in the first half, they did show elements in the second half that they're still a wee bit off where they were, but the fact that they've brought back Costello, James McCarthy played a wee bit, Owen Merchant come off the bench, they look very close to what they'll be come championship.
What was the difference in that first half that we haven't seen maybe from Dublin throughout the rest of the league so far?
Yeah, look, it looked like it had a championship feel about it. They pushed up heavy on the kickouts. They got a lot of joy because they kept getting the ball around the middle, and when they had the ball, they were very hard to dispossess, and they kept getting the right man. But they had Scully, Hurd, Kilkenny was pulling the strings. They just had all the answers, and whenever Owen Hampshire went off for the black card, they scored 6 points in the 10 minutes that Owen Hampshire went off when they were down to 40 men. And for me, that was the key. At that stage, they didn't look like they were ever going to pull away, but once they got the extra man, they just went to town because they pushed an extra man in the kick out, and they possibly could have had a goal in that mix as well.
As you were saying there, return of the Mac, James McCarthy back in the squad, but 2 players, I don't know for you, but for me, really impressed today. Cormac Costello, but particularly Robbie McDade. What did they bring to the 15 there today?
Yeah, I think McDade's worked great off the ball, and it's what he done whenever he didn't have the ball. He raided up the left wing time and time again, and eventually then he got his point. But as well as doing really well defensively, he just kept dragging the Tyrone players down the field with him, and that's not where a half forward wants to be. Like, he has been one of the foreign players in Dublin club football for 4 or 5 years, and probably didn't get the time under Jim Gavin that he maybe felt he deserved, but it looks like there's a wee bit more faith in him now, and he definitely repaid that today with a really strong performance.
With this swag we've seen back from Dublin, like in terms of their sort of key players, Kilkenny, Fenton, Dean Rock, did you notice anything from them different today that we didn't see in the previous games?
Yeah, well look, the one thing about it was they got 13 points, Dean Rock scored 3 points, and he didn't score any frees. So if they can get the likes of Dean Rock's contributing from play a wee bit more, that's the one thing that's maybe been lacking a wee bit, is that they need him for his frees. But once they get Conor O'Callaghan back in at full forward, Brian Fenton had been really poor in the league just by his own high standards, but he looked to be back today. Obviously they were missing a couple of players, but he made hay at midfield, and it was a great battle. And I thought between him and Kilkenny, they just seemed to control all the ball around the middle. I also thought Brian Hurd was massive, particularly towards the end when he took the catch under the crossbar. That's what you want, box to box, but doing all the things in the big moments, and I thought he was very good.
For you, Brian Howard, where's his best position in this Dublin team?
It's just, I don't know, I would love to see him at midfield because he does so many things that is unlike a forward. He could be a half back, he's just so versatile. Wherever they need him, they could play him. But I think at wing half forward, it just means that he can go where he wants. He's not under a huge pressure going forward because they just have enough stuff there. And he covered every blade of grass. And like, I know he didn't get a score today, he was probably the only forward who didn't score. But I think his general use of the ball and his play, was the highest standard, and he just allowed Kilkenny just to express himself around the half-forward line. And I thought the Dublin subs coming on, they just looked a wee bit more at it. They're still light on the bench in comparison, whenever they're missing a lot of players there. But if they can get their best players on the field and keep them fit, I think, yes, the Leinster Championship, probably outside of Kildare, it looks like it's going to be very weak this year again. They're going to probably be at the latter stages. If they can avoid relegation out of Division 1 and have a bit of momentum going into the Championship, they are still going to be thereabouts, and it'll take a very good team to beat them.
Looking at Tyrone, what do you think of their performance? One thing you did mention there, Dublin, I think every score they got today was from play. So discipline wasn't really an issue from Tyrone yet. They were down to 14 men. But overall, what do you think Tyrone learned from today?
I think the game looked over at half time, and when you're in that situation, all you ask your team to do is, can you win the second half? And to be fair, Tyrone did do that. They had a really good passage of play. Richie Donnelly came off the bench, scored 2 points. Michael Conroy came off the bench for the first time this year, and he's a player that's done really well in club football. Tyrone, he's been in around the top scorer for a year or two. The problem that Tyrone have is that out of the 8 points they scored, only Nell Sludden out of the starting 15 scored a point. Richie Donnelly got 2. They only got 3 from play, and they were reliant on frees. They had 2 good goal chances, took neither. So I think they had a good second half. They had a few good performances, but I think they're going to need a wee bit more, like having to play Kerry and Mayo, probably the 2 form teams in the country in the last 2 games. They're going to need at least a win out of one of them. And if they don't win the next one, it's just going to leave it all to play for in the very last game. But look, the league's the best competition we have at the moment. Every game, you look down the divisions, and what you look at Louth and Antrim, and it's just so many teams coming through and showing a wee bit of form now, particularly the Ulster teams, that it's just going to make for a really good championship, particularly in Ulster.
As you were saying there, players making an impact off the bench for Tyrone. We do know from during the week they have lost another player leaving the panel, Lee Brennan. How is that going to impact Tyrone further on down the line, that players are leaving? Like, the squad depth definitely not as strong as it was last year.
No, it's not. Look, and the fact that they've lost Tiernan McCann and Lee Brennan player and Rooney O'Neill, it just means that if you look at the last year's subs coming on, when Tyrone won the All-Ireland, McKenna was coming in, Dara Canavan was coming in. These players are now starting, so it just means that the players that are on the bench that have come in, brilliant players in their own right, but just lack experience at the real top level of county football. And it's a learning curve, and the problem you have when you're bringing in young new players is that, as Nathan Donnelly found out today, who's been a brilliant club footballer for Killyclaw for 3 or 4 years, it's at the steep learning edge of it, and if you're not on it in Division 1, you will get punished. So I think Tyrone players leaving, come championship, it won't be a big deal for the team. The problem will be the standards in training. Tiernan McCann, players like that, demand the highest standards of training, and the other players, they may not be there. I don't know, but look, it's not good for Tyrone to lose them, because it just ruins things even for training, for your AVB games, for your preparation coming into big games where you need your best players in training every night so you can pick your best team come a Sunday.
Are you seeing any pattern in play from Tyrone throughout this league that maybe we'll see a bit more of and develop on when it comes to championship?
Yeah, I think, look, early on in the first, until Paddy Hampshire got the black card in the first 15 minutes, they were kicking long ball into McShane, into McCurry, and they were almost reaping the benefits. They just one pass too many. So I think they will continue this kicking game. If they can get McKenna fit and get him into the running game, they have the option to play it either way. But I just think where they're at now, they need to get their defence settled. They'll be delighted that Rooney McNamee get the full first game of the year. He'll be a big player because that allows Paddy Hampshire to move out the field. Brian Kennedy was injured today, and he was really missed because Hampshire had to go to midfield, and they just didn't have the same fluidity as they would have had through the year. When Kennedy comes back, him and Colin Kilpatrick will be formidable, and they cover ground, and one goes forward, one goes back. So they lost that today, and I thought they were a wee bit gapey at the back whenever Dublin were just coming right to and running the ball down their centre.
So next weekend, a huge weekend regards the relegation battle. Dublin's win today sort of draws Donegal back into it. Big game between Kildare and Monaghan next weekend. I think Tyrone are away to Mayo, and as you said, Dublin against Donegal. How do you see this relegation battle playing out for the rest of the league?
Yeah, well, outside of I suppose Mayo and Kerry and the Armagh, like, everybody else has still got a chance of getting pulled into this. So nobody wants to be going to the last game. What looks now, it's going to be a Mayo Kerry final, and it's a case now of the teams in the middle will be happy enough to be in the middle, but nobody wants to be going to the last game looking 2 points. Monaghan do what Monaghan do, and the difference between, I suppose, Monaghan have been in a situation 2, 3, 4 times. they won't panic. They'll know what it's like to go into the last game needing a win. So Monaghan are probably the best suited to this sort of a battle. But All-Ireland champions do not want to be in the relegation zone, and all we have now, the last 2 All-Ireland champions in there. Dublin have a bit of momentum going into it, but now Tyrone have to regroup and pick it up, and it's not going to be easy. And there's going to be 2 big teams going down, and in the other side, it looks like in Division 2 is going to be a carve up between Derry and Galway and Roscommon, and Derry done got a massive point in the Hyde today, so they're going to be looking forward to getting Galway at Owenbeg next Saturday.
I was just going to mention Division 2, your own county, Derry, drawn against Roscommon there today. It's very interesting, that top of Division 2 with those 3 teams at the moment. How impressed have you been with Derry so far this campaign? And throughout the county of Derry, did you expect this level from the team in this league campaign?
Yeah, look, Galway and Roscommon have been Division 1 teams over the last number of years, dropping up and coming down. But they're at that level, they're at the next level below Division 1, and they're very, very good. I suppose, personally, I thought if Derry could have a good league, stay in Division 2 even, that would be good. But like the teams at the lower end of it, they blew them away really, really easily. And the fact that they went to Roscommon, like very few of the teams, even the Dublins and Tyrones, they all struggled in Hyde Park, and Derry could have stole the full 2 points had Emmett Bradley's free kick went over near the end with the last kick. So Derry have been very, very impressive. They've pretty much playing the same team every week, but that's Rory Gallagher's thing. He doesn't mix and match, he doesn't change. He's got a formula, and they are playing to the peak of their potential. And like Shane McGuigan today scores 8 points. Derry have only 5 different scorers, which is low for Derry. Like the last day out, at 9 different scores. So when Shane McGuigan is off form, like he was the last day, different people stepped up. Today he was on it, and they were 4 points down at half time. To come back and draw that game and to possibly nearly win it, it just shows how far Derry have came from being in Division 4 3 seasons ago.
What has happened with Derry? Like the last 10 years, maybe they have been an up and down team, inconsistency there. But what has changed? Like from the structure down, has there been? Is this currently what we're looking with Derry?
AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.